Chapter 1. Knock knock, let the devil in. As the first rumblings of a thunderstorm began to form over the city of Mustafu, a young boy of around 14, with messy green hair clad in a school uniform comprised of a black Gakurin uniform with yellow buttons and a pair of large red boots with a cane to support his ruined right leg, limped back to the apartment his mother had gotten him for when the school year began at the Topothaline school he had been selected to attend. Yasujin High kicked off in a few days. Izuku Midoriya heaved a heavy sigh. His mother's love was really the only thing he still had going for him these days. His dream was dead, and with it, his faith in the people he'd looked up to ever since he was a small boy, particularly the number one hero, All Might. Ugh, even thinking about that show-off made him feel a spike of anger and hatred after what happened. Hospital 6 weeks ago. Izuku groaned as he lay against something soft. Where was he? How did he get here? Last thing he remembered was entering the simulated city where the physical exam for entrance to UA was supposed to take place. Izuku struggled to open his eyes as he tossed and turned on whatever he was laying on, only to experience agonizing pain. Why did everything hurt? His right leg in particular felt like it was being cut open with a knife. As he writhed in agony, he began to hear voices, and they sounded like they were nearby. Holding up? Said a familiar voice. All Might. But what was he doing here? Or even was here? We've done all we can for him, but his leg not even my healing quirk can fix, that a nearby female voice that Izuku didn't recognize said. Perhaps that's for the best, then. I admire the boy's determination, but he needs to understand that without a practical quirk that he can use to defend himself, he's going to get himself killed. This time, he got lucky. He was in a simulated environment, and we were on hand. But if he keeps going like this, eventually that luck is going to run out. He needs to understand that, as hard as reality is, not all of us can be heroes. The truth is that while it's not bad to dream, you also have to consider what's realistic. Izuku's blood ran cold at those words. What? A memory surfaced in his mind's eye, one of his fondest memories of All Might, one of him proudly declaring that anyone can be a hero, that shattered like glass and was replaced with emptiness that echoed the words that All Might had just spoken. Like a rising thunder, a surge of anger and outrage began to grow within him. It wasn't long before Izuku's eyes flew open, a look of pure anger on his face as he, painfully, sat up and glared daggers in the direction of the number one hero and what he now realized was a recovery girl, which meant that he was in the hospital, both of which became alarmed as Izuku screamed out, "Liar. Ooh, you're awake. How much of that did you hear?" Recovery girl said nervously. All of it, hissed Izuku in anger as tears began running down his face as he glared at All Might. What happened to anyone can be a hero? Huh. Was that just a PR statement? I wonder how many other people took those words to heart like I did. I worshipped you. I worshipped all you heroes. But, big surprise, can't be a hero if you don't have a quirk. I should have known better than to take you at your word. Get out of here. Now. I hate you. I hate all you heroes. Building us up so you can tear us down when we want to be like you. When we want to stand beside you. Too overwhelmed by the pain of his greatest and most closely held dream crumbling to ashes in his hands was Izuku to notice the troubled look on All Might's face, or to hear the voice in the hallway. But, at least he felt marginally better when he felt his mother enter the room and embrace him in a tight hug. Present day? Guess it's true what they say, never meet your heroes, thought Izuku as he looked down at his ruined leg with a scowl on his face as he continued to walk back towards his apartment. Still, it wasn't all bad. At least with his newfound sense of clarity in regards to heroes and villains, he had attained clarity in other places in his life, namely where Bakugo was concerned. School always had been his least favorite place to be, mainly because of Katsuki Bakugo, but ever since the boy had loudly announced that he had been accepted into UA, he had become even more insufferable, which led to something that was as painful as it was, admittedly, satisfying. Junior high school courtyard 1 week earlier. I'm telling you, no way I wasn't going to get in. Give it 2 years, maybe 3, and I'll be the top hero around, Bakugo boasted loudly for everyone within listening distance to hear, much to Izuku's annoyance. The green-haired boy was just about done listening to his former friend brag on and on about how easily he got in, and how awesome he and his quirk were. As Bakugu continued his boasting, he caught sight of Izuku. "Well, look who it is. How's it going, Deku?" said Bakugu as he and his flunkies surrounded Izuku. "I still can't believe they actually let someone quirkless into the physical exam. Kinda a bummer, you only wrecked the one leg. Part of me was hoping that you'd get yourself killed, but I guess you can't have everything." Something inside Izuku snapped as he looked up and gave Bakugu a look that actually made the blonde boy's face fall a little. "You know what I can't believe? After all the things you did, after all the bullying you've done, not just to me, but to other quirkless people like me, you still got into UA high school and make a disgrace of the true heroes who go there, while I get stuck in a high school with other quirkless people and my dream dies. But I can see one benefit of all this. At least I will be rid of you." And with that, Izuku balled up his fist, reached way back, and asserted himself by landing a solid left hook on Bakugu's face, sending the blonde boy sprawling to the ground, having been caught completely by surprise by Izuku's sudden punch. Immediately, Izuku felt the release of something heavy on his shoulders lift. For 10 years, he had had to put up with Kakno. He wasn't Kachin anymore. Kakin had died the second Katsuki Bakugu had developed his quirk while he remained as quirkless as ever. This person was not his friend and never would be again. This person was someone he despised, and what he'd just done was something he'd been waiting a long time to do. "I didn't realize how much I've been wanting to do that before now," Izuku said aloud, only for Bakugu's hate-filled glare to bore directly into him, as the grass on the ground started to smoke, a clear indication that he was about to use his quirk. Present day. "Even if that blast had been painful, I don't regret a thing." Bakugu had that coming, thought Izuku as the subway train he was sitting on began to slow to a stop and the doors opened, allowing Izuku into the station. Izuku slowly limped from the subway station to the nearby church. The old building had seen better days. Its dilapidated state was roughly how Izuku felt after these past few weeks. As he slowly hobbled up the steps, he passed by a girl around his age with vines for hair who was walking down. Izuku gave a quick "good day," which the girl returned, followed by a "and God bless," before they continued on their separate ways. Izuku pushed open the doors to the main area of the church, slowly approaching the large crucifix. When he was directly before it, Izuku knelt down on his good leg, put his hands together, and began to pray. "Dear Father, I know I haven't really been a believer, but there are stories of people who've reached their lowest, and..." Izuku sighs, "If you're really there, I just want to prove to All Might, to society, that they're wrong about me. Wrong about everyone that's quirkless." Izuku pauses, thinking about his words. "No, I want to prove that they're wrong about everything. That anyone, no matter the power they have, can be a real hero." Meanwhile, unknown to Izuku, a large meteor was making its way to Earth, and on that meteor was the one above all's answer. As the meteor drew near the Earth, it began to swerve erratically, in a way that no natural meteor should be able to do, almost as though it were alive and confused somehow. As the meteor fell lower into the planet's atmosphere, it broke apart into several pieces. Two of the pieces were breaking apart faster than the rest as they fell through the planet's atmosphere, the largest bits heading towards Japan along with the rest, all except one that was heading towards the artificial landmass known as Island. Back on Earth, Izuku finished his prayer and had made his way to Dagoba Beach, which he had painstakingly cleaned to prepare himself for the UA entrance exam, for all the good that did. Izuku looked at the pristine sand and crystal clear water and smiled, remembering the words a kind old man said to him as he finished cleaning the beach. "I guess one man can make a difference is right. Now if only the rest of the world saw it that way," Izuku said sadly. He turned to walk away, but before he could, something large crash-landed halfway down the beach, startling him greatly. "What the heck was that?" cried Izuku as he took deep breaths to calm his nerves. Looking around, it didn't seem like anyone else had noticed it landing, so it probably wasn't from a villain attack. He began trudging cautiously in the direction of the impact site to see what it was. Once he finally reached the impact site, he noticed what appeared to be a fragment of a meteor. An excited gleam in his eye that hadn't been there for these last few weeks glistened in his eye as he observed it. Izuku slowly reached down and found that it was cool enough to touch. Not only that, But upon closer examination, there was something funny about it that he couldn't quite put his finger on. Still, though, he was the first one on the scene, and nobody else seemed interested in it. Well, you know what they say, finders keepers, thought Izuku as he picked up the meteor piece and tucked it under his left arm before limping away towards the subway to catch his train back to his apartment. Izuku's apartment later that evening. After the annoying series of events that turned a normal hour and 10 minutes into 2 hours and 15, God did Izuku hate traffic and his landlord. The greenette finally entered his apartment completely and utterly exhausted. Setting the meteorite fragment on his bedroom's desk, Izuku wandered back into his small kitchen and opened up a bag of frozen tater tots and a box of instant ramen and began preparing them. Once they were ready, Izuku sat down and began to eat, totally unaware that the meteor piece had begun rocking, gaining several small cracks, only for it to stop once Izuku had finished eating. After taking a shower and changing into some more comfortable clothes, Izuku flopped down on his bed and turned on his small TV and began flicking through the channels, growing increasingly irritated at the sight of report after report after report of heroes battling villains, hero ranking changes, advertisements for new All Might merchandise. Izuku shut off the television before his anger got the better of him and turned onto his back. Izuku fumed as he stared up at the ceiling. All his life, he had looked up to All Might, only to discover that his hero was a fraud. That realization helped Izuku see many other flaws in the hero system that he'd have otherwise ignored. If only I could prove him wrong. If only, Izuku said sluggishly as he finally drifted to sleep. Meanwhile, the meteor piece began shaking violently and started to crack open like an egg, and from it emerged what appeared to be a living mass of black tar that hovered above the meteor fragment it had been encased in. The mass of black goo made noises that didn't sound like the noise of moving slime, but rather guttural growlings. Perhaps it was speaking in its native tongue, before it made movements akin to those of a snake's head looking around, before it finally seemed to gaze on Izuku's sleeping form. The sentient slime made more growling noises, as though it sounded disappointed somehow. Making a noise that sounded like a sigh, the slime made more reluctant-sounding growling noises before it stretched its way over to Izuku's sleeping form and began to sink deeply into his chest and meld itself into his body, before spreading over his arms and legs, similarly melding itself into his body. As the slime snaked its way towards Izuku's face and began to meld with it, the young boy began writhing in agony, as though he were gripped in a terrible nightmare, before his eyes shot open to behold what was going on before him in horror. "Sleep now, Izuku Midoriya," a haunting, raspy voice said to Izuku. "For tomorrow, we begin to spin our web. This world ain't gonna know what hit him, ha 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 ha." A surge of sheer terror gripped hold of Izuku, only for his vision to suddenly clear as Izuku shot up from his bed, panting in the sunlight, as he looked around in a panic, not noticing the broken meteorite. "We only found one living specimen," the man made of shadows said to the two-way television in the bar. A large transparent container filled with a writhing green fluid inside was close by. "I am aware. The remains of the other two have been given to Dr. Garaki for study," the unseen man replied. The shadow man shifted slightly. "You have a question?" "I do." The living shadow paused to think about how to word his query. "Why did you leave the living one with us? Wouldn't it be better for Dr. Garaki to have it as well?" "No, it would not. I am already aware of the capabilities of these creatures. They require a host to survive for extended periods. In exchange, they can empower even the weakest human to superhuman levels, and I am hoping it would give my protege a buff, as he would say, during our debut." "I see. And you believe Tomurasen would be reasonable towards this gift?" "He would have no reason not to. After all, I am his sensei." Chapter 2. Venom. Izuku knew that there was something wrong with him when he got out of bed that morning following that horrifying nightmare he had last night, but it had taken Izuku a while to get his brain calmed enough to notice it. For one thing, his damaged leg was decidedly not damaged anymore, and was functioning as well as his other leg, something that by all logic and reason should have been impossible even with corrective surgery, if what recovery girl told him and his mother was correct, and he doubted it wasn't considering she's one of the few healing pro-heroes who have an actual doctorate in medicine. For another thing, Izuku noticed he was really hungry for tater tots. And chocolate. Lots and lots of chocolate. Either that, or juicy, brains. That last thought almost made him puke, and definitely not fungus. That stuff was absolutely disgusting. Plus, there was no telling what effects they'd have on him if he were to just start eating random mushrooms. Where the heck did all that come from? Thought Izuku once he realized what exactly had just run through his head as he dumped a whole bag of tater tots on a frying pan before reaching for some seasoned salt. "Ooh, that smells delectable. Go ahead and throw some on there," said an alarmingly familiar haunting, raspy voice that caused Deku to freeze in place and look around in both fright and confusion at the sound of the voice from his nightmare last night, only to find that there was no one there. And yet, Izuku couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched closely and intently. Then, as Izuku took a look in a nearby mirror hanging from his wall, he leapt backwards in fright. Where his reflection should have been, there was instead a monster that was black as obsidian with demonic white eyes, razor-sharp fangs that looked as though they were sharp enough to chew through solid steel, a tongue that looked to be as long as the top part of a python, and while not quite on the level of someone with a quirk that turned them into a hulking brute, Izuku could tell that this creature was taller and stronger than any normal human being, not counting Mount Lady. For some reason, though, Izuku thought it was missing something, some kind of mark or distinctive symbol. Izuku closed his eyes and shook his head, opening them again to reveal that the creature had vanished, and in its place was a 14, almost 15-year-old boy about ready to jump out of his skin. Maybe I should start seeing a therapist. I think everything that's happened to me lately is finally getting to me. Next thing I know, I'll be laughing like a hyena and making a box of deadly prank toys, thought Izuku as he resumed making his tater tots. After all, they say all it takes is one bad day to drive you crazy, and I've had quite a few of those lately. A short while later, the tater tots were ready, and Izuku was pulling them out of the oven to let the pan cool before putting them all on a plate to eat. However, almost as soon as he set the pan down, the voice from his nightmare spoke again. "Okay, I tried to do this the nice way. Now we do this my way," the voice said before a mass of black sludge or tar gathered from beneath his skin, extended from shoulder, and almost touched his face as the same fanged thing from the mirror formed from it. "Boo!" the thing yelled, causing Izuku to jump back and trip over his own feet. "Going to ignore me now? Hard to ignore something that's staring you in the face, isn't it?" "Wawawaha," Izuku stammered in sheer terror as he stared at the thing that closed in on him. The thing sighed. "And this is why hosts nearing maturity are not the best idea. So volatile and fragile. I need food," it says before heading over to the tater tots and tearing into them with gusto. Watching all this unfold before him with barely contained terror, Izuku finally was able to speak. "Wow, how hot are you?" he managed to squeak out. "You're not a quirk, you can't be." The thing said, its mouth still full of tater tots as it looked back at Izuku. "Ima, hold on," it says before gulping down its mouthful of food. "I'm a Clintar. We're a race of hive-minded symbiotic organisms. Well, something like that. My name, however, is Venom, and you are mine." "Why are you saying you're an alien? And what do you mean that I'm yours?" asked Izuku. Panic began to take hold of him, hoping that literally anyone but a hero would come to help him. "Ah, you'd throw me out and waste away as a loser rather than accepting the power I offer? Power enough to allow a powerless weakling like you to walk with the false gods you wanted to join the pantheon of? Power enough to finally prove this world wrong about everything they know about it? TSK, shame. I thought you were better than that, Izuku," Venom said as he leaned closer to Izuku, a sly smile on its fanged mouth. Izuku froze. How the heck did Venom know about all that? About what his dream had once been, and what his new heart's desire was. For that matter, how was an alien able to even speak perfectly fluent Japanese? "Okay, I'll bite. What exactly can you do?" asked Izuku. Venom laughed as he slithered over to Izuku to look him in the eye. "That's more like it, Izuku. For starters, I can enhance your senses, strength, speed, reflexes to superhuman levels, and allow you to detect impending danger before it even happens, bestow upon you a healing factor that allows you to survive almost injury, even regenerating severed limbs, and that's just the start of the power I offer you. And how exactly can you do all of that? When we bond with a host, we copy some parts of them to empower us and help the next host. Like how I gained your insatiable appetite for tater tots. Really? Izuku just replied, completely disbelieving him. We don't get to pick what sticks, okay? Venom said with audible exasperation in his voice, before Izuku gets off the ground and dusts himself off and heads for the door, grabbing a hoodie and his fold-up cane on the way, despite no longer needing the ladder. I can't deal with this. I am not dealing with this. It's a hallucination and I just need some air. A short while later. You're really going to ignore everything I told you? Venom asked in his head as they walked down the street, fresh from a confectionery store, pockets lined with every chocolate bar he could afford. As he walked, Izuku just kept silent as he mulled over everything that happened in the past hour. All right, if you're going to stick around, we need to set some ground rules, said Izuku firmly. First rule, we don't kill or eat people. I remember the hunger for brains, so don't say you haven't eaten them before. All that gets me is a one-way trip to Tartarus prison, and you a one-way trip to some government or private lab run by a suit scouting for intergalactic real estate, explained Izuku as he took a bite of chocolate. Pussy. Venom's blunt insult actually brought Izuku up short. Knowing Japanese he could understand, but Izuku had never called anyone that before. I've seen your memories of that Bakuga brat. Oh, I hope I get to meet him sometime. Be fun to knock him down a peg or two dozen. Venom said within his mind. That made much more sense, sadly. However, we can beat them close to it and leave them to rot as they serve out their sentences hooked up to a hospital bed, said Izuku. Oh, I do believe I can work with that, said Venom with a dark chuckle. Izuku could see the symbiote's excited grin in his mind's eye. But only the really bad people. Anyone else who doesn't fit the bill, we beat black and blue but not to the point of near death, and anyone who surrenders peacefully, we incapacitate, but not excessively harm, said Izuku. Oh, and what, exactly, would you define as a really bad person? Venom asked in a mocking tone. Rapists, pedophiles, serial killers, serial rapists, willing kidnappers, knowingly and willingly abusive individuals, psychopaths, any combination of the previous you-know-what. I'll just make a list for you to read later, said Izuku. Not murderers? Questioned Venom. A single murder can be forgiven but never forgotten, especially if the killer isn't willing or if it was an accident, like due to a weapon's malfunction, for example, explained Izuku. But if they do kill someone or more than one person with the explicit or obvious intent to do so, or show no remorse for doing so, then yes, they have officially forfeited their right to eating solid food or being able to do much of anything ever again. I see, said Venom within Izuku's mind. You know, Izuku, looking at some of these memories, it seems like you were dedicated to becoming a true hero until All Might finally crushed your dream. And now here you are, plotting to beat criminals into paste as a vigilante. It's madness how much someone can change in 6 weeks. Izuku gave a small smile. Yeah, well, when you take off the rose-tinted glasses when it comes to these so-called heroes, it becomes surprisingly easy to see the truth behind the facade of the world we live in today. The heroes of today aren't heroes, merely vigilantes who have immunity from the law because they won the genetic jackpot. They give people hope, only to take it away again when they don't have the right powers or any powers at all, said Izuku. That's what I want to change. I want to prove that there are no such things as villainous or weak quirks, and that anyone truly can be a hero. All it takes is the dedication and the heart to be better. Izuku finishes as he takes another bite out of the chocolate that was starting to melt a bit from his body temperature. The next thing Izuku knew was that something small had run into him, knocking him to the ground with surprising force. Gah? What was that? Cried Venom within Izuku's mind. Izuku looked up at what had knocked him over and was shocked at the sorry state of the child. What the heck? She's covered in bandages and cuts. Izuku couldn't believe his eyes as he got up to ask her where she came from. All it took was one touch to realize. She's trembling from fright. Who did this to her? Now, Eri, don't you think you should apologize for running into him? A man called out from the shadows as he approached them. As they drew near, Izuku could feel the impending danger senses that Venom granted flaring up. When the shadows stopped covering him, Izuku could see he was wearing a face mask akin to a plague doctor's. I'm sorry for my daughter. She just keeps playing around and getting hurt. I don't know what to do with her sometimes. The man says with a smile. Hey, Venom, remember what I said about abusive individuals and psychopaths? Izuku asked Venom inside his mind. Yeez. Not while children are around. Izuku threw the half-eaten chocolate bar at the man's face, making him have a massive freak out, while Izuku pulled Eri into his arms and ran at full speed back to his apartment complex. Don't worry, Eri, Izuku said to her as they ran. Your dad won't hurt you anymore if I have anything to say about it. If we have anything to say about it. Venom corrected his host with a noticeable snarl. Careful, Venom, or I'll start thinking you care. Izuku snarked back at his passenger. Of course I care. Young ones should never be harmed. Even the most vile of my kind agrees on that. Hi, Mrs. Chun. By Mrs. Chun. Izuku says rapidly to the apartment complex's receptionist as he passes by her to get to the elevator. Izuku wa? Asked Mrs. Chun as Izuku, who appeared to have what looked like a small child that looked malnourished and covered in bandages, entered the elevator and quickly pressed the button for his floor, leaving her completely confused. I'm not paid enough for this job. She sighed as she went back to her magazine. A few moments later, as soon as Izuku got to his apartment, he sat Eri down on the couch, locked the door, and barricaded it with one of his chairs. As soon as he had finished, he looked over to the little girl, only to see that her eyes had reddened. Had she been crying the whole way to the apartment? That might not hold for long, but it's the best I can do for now. Let's get you cleaned up, okay? Izuku asks Eri as he approaches her, only for the girl to shy away from him. Eri. Eri mumbled something that Izuku couldn't make out, so he slowly crouched down. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear what you said. Could you repeat it, please? Why? Why? Why what? Why did you help me? I'm cursed. The little girl screams as she breaks down crying again. Izuku's heart clenched at those words coming from someone so young, especially since he thought the same for a short time. Who told you that? Izuku asked as he sat down next to her. Eri, was it your father who told you that? Not him, Daddy. Daddy's gone. I saw him go away, Eri said through her tears and running snot. Izuku rubbed her back comfortingly. Eri, just because your dad left. Daddy didn't leave. I made him go away. Eri screamed at him hysterically, making Izuku realize exactly what she meant by that. Oh my god. Eri, I'm so sorry, whispered Izuku. So that means that masked man really is not her father, Venom said inside Izuku's mind, his voice filled with growing rage. He'll be begging for death to save him by the time we're done with him, Izuku told the symbiote before returning his attention to the girl in front of him. Hey, Eri, Izuku said. You don't have to worry about that bad man in the mask anymore. I'll take you to U.A. They have specialists there who can help break your curse and keep you safe. If that doesn't work, then I have a friend. He'll make sure that masked man can't hurt you or anyone else ever again. Eri looked up at the greenette, a small glimmer of hope in her eyes. Really? They can help break my curse? She said, her voice trembling. Yeah, or at the very least, they can help you learn how to keep it from hurting people you don't mean to, said Izuku with a friendly smile. Now, come on, let's go get you cleaned up and maybe get you a proper meal for a change. How's that sound? Eri sniffled, but smiled up at Izuku. A few hours later, the afternoon shadows had begun to form as a much happier Eri, now with fresh bandages, cleaned wounds, and now wearing Izuku's gray hoodie and eating apple slices, made her way to Izuku's side as the pair got ready to make their way to UA. However, while he was cleaning Eri's wounds, he found what Izuku assumed was a tracker chip embedded under her skin, which meant that whatever the masked man was doing needed Eri to work. Actually, if that was the case, Izuku was surprised the man hadn't shown up and tried to take her back. All right, Eri, I'm going to go ahead and make sure the coast is clear. I want you to stay here and not open the door for anyone except for me, understand? Izuku instructed Eri, who nodded to show she understood. Good girl. With any luck, I'll be able to get you to the heroes and my friend can just enjoy a nice evening at home, Izuku said before he removed the chair from the door and exited the apartment before taking the elevator back down to the lobby. As the elevator drew closer to the ground floor, the early warning senses provided by Venom kicked in again. Get ready, thought Izuku as the elevator reached the ground floor. Gladly. As soon as Izuku walked out of the elevator, he came across around 24 armed thugs. And could they look any more stereotypical? You people really don't want to do this, Izuku said to them as they raised their weapons to him, some of which looked like grenade launchers. The girl now? The lead thug said as he cocked his pistol. All right, you asked for it. Now. Yes. Venom quickly covered Izuku and grew to their full size before letting out a vicious roar at the group of gathered thugs, who were immediately thrown into a panic. What the hell kind of quirk is that? One of the thugs shouted. Was the boss actually right? Another thug yelled. Kill it. Open fire, yelled the lead thug as his subordinates did exactly that, and a few grenades came Venom's way. Venom, however, simply created a shield out of his biomass to catch the grenades and throw them back at the thugs who launched them, rendering them out of commission before charging at the lead thug, grabbing him by the leg, and slamming him into the ground with earth-shattering force, before turning his right hand into a huge mace and using it to lay waste on another group of thugs, breaking nearly every bone in their bodies, before using 4 tendrils or tentacles of some kind to grab a hold of another group of thugs, lift them high into the air, and slam them into the ground, leaving craters where they impacted before unleashing a mighty roar to the heavens. Within the apparent monstrosity, Izuku was completely enthralled by everything he was experiencing. Never before had he felt so alive. It was like he had been trapped within a cage for nearly all his life, and now he was finally free. It was beautiful. Realizing the losing battle they were facing, the few thugs that remained decided to turn tail and run for it. Venom, however, snarled and shot something from the back of his wrist at one of the retreating thugs, which latched directly onto the thug's back, with him being blissfully unaware of it, too preoccupied with running for his life. And that should lead us right to their boss. Symbiote and host thought in perfect harmony before Venom took off after the thugs, leaping into the air and crashing through the wall right above the door, shooting a strand of webbing that latched onto a nearby building and began to follow the thug's escape vehicle from above, remaining undetected by the thugs during the chase. A short time later, the masked man known as Overhaul loaded his hands up with nearly half a bottle of hand sanitizer, still smoldering with rage over that little shit making off with his property. Oh well, odds were, the little shit was dead now, and his property was on its way back to him, and he could resume making his products with little fuss. Well, little fuss from his employees and customers anyway. As for the girl, well, he would need to make sure she didn't slip her leash again. Speak of the devil, here they come, thought Overhaul as he noticed the approaching vehicle that he recognized as belonging to one of his men. However, as it drew near, Overhaul quickly realized something was wrong, as from what he could see, each of the men inside had looks of sheer terror on their faces and with a noticeable lack of his property. What happened? Where's Eri? Overhaul demanded furiously to his underlings. The idiots he sent began babbling over one another, barely able to get an actual word out before a shadow covered them all. Oh, you won't be seeing her anytime soon. Suddenly, the source of that shadow, a massive black creature with a fang-filled mouth, a nightmarishly long tongue, landed on top of the vehicle his men had been driving, flattening it like a tin can before it shot some of itself at his 3 underlings, trapping them against the wall. Overhaul reacted as he usually did when someone with a quirk tried to interfere with his plans, drawing his special gun and shooting the diseased with his cure-filled bullets. Each bullet impacted the hideous creature, except instead of causing the tar-like substance to fall away from the human encased within it, its grin only grew wider. Your thugs already tried shooting us. What made you think you'd have better luck? It said as it extended a tendril, smacking the gun from his hand before grabbing one of his legs and lifting him into the air. You cut up a little girl. How about we return the favor? Should it be the eyes first, the lungs, or pancreas? So many options, so little time. Overhaul stared in horrified disbelief at the thing holding him. What in God's name are you? We had said before sliding its disgusting tongue against his forehead, our Venom. Before Venom could do anything, a large cable wrapped around him and pulled him away from the masked man. Venom looked up in rage at his captor to see two individuals, one looking like a gremlin or goblin, wearing purple and carrying him through his hover device. The other had electric blue skin and was wearing a green and yellow suit modeled after electricity or lightning. Who the hell are these clowns? The one in the green and yellow is the living electricity hero, Electris. He's ranked 25 on the Japanese Pro Hero chart. The one with the green skin and hover glider is the Halloween hero, Green Gremlin. He's ranked 24. They work together more often than not, but it's strange to not see either of them with Professor Squid. They must think we're a villain, Venom told his host before swiping his claw at the cable, severing it in a single slice as Electris and Green Gremlin circled around him, awaiting his next move. We can't be fighting heroes, not yet. We need to get out of here and lie low for a while. We'll deal with this stunted piece of slime and crush his bones into powder another time, Izuku told Venom as he and Venom looked down at the terrified overhaul with a look of disgust on his face before he returned his attention to the two heroes. Venom let out a monstrous roar at the two heroes before making his escape, with Electris and the Gremlin in hot pursuit, throwing bolts of lightning and concussion grenades shaped like jack-o'-lanterns at him in equal measure, before Venom shot a web at one of Green Gremlin's grenades and threw it back at the two heroes, stunning them just long enough for Venom to lose them as he continued to swing away from them. Once he was satisfied with the amount of distance he had put between himself and the two heroes, Venom landed on top of a building with a grunt, only to look up and find himself face to face with none other than All Might himself, standing proud and firmly in place as he stared at what he no doubt thought was nothing more than just another villain, likely having been tipped off by Electris, Green Gremlin, or a concerned citizen. As the two beings stared each other down, waiting for the other to make the first move, the tension in the air was thick enough to be cut with a knife before Venom finally spoke. No more false gods. Not while we're around. Venom snarled, anger filling his voice as he released a vicious roar before fading away and ultimately vanishing into thin air. All Might kept his guard up, turning left and right, not knowing that his opponent had already fled the scene. Not too far away. Venom became visible once again before reverting back into Izuku, now clad in a black zip-up hoodie, instead of the gray one that he had given Eri earlier. As he began to walk away, Izuku's mind was reeling from what he had just experienced. He couldn't believe just how, there was no other word for it, good, he had felt during his transformation into Venom. All the power he had felt coursing through him, that feeling of being truly complete, all of it, it was intoxicating. Ever since he was 4 years old, he had always wanted power, the power to protect others, the power to be a hero, just like he'd once thought All Might to be. And thanks to Venom, he finally had the power he'd always wanted. It was a heck of a trip. You know, Venom, I think you and I are going to get along just fine, Izuku told the symbiote within his mind as their purpose became clear. In a world of heroes and villains, they would be the antihero. In a world where All Might was a symbol of peace, a false peace, Venom would be a symbol of vengeance for the people oppressed by that peace. A symbol. Now that was an idea. So, after we drop Eri off with the heroes, we need to go over some suit design choices. But, after that, what do you want to do? The symbiote laughed. Way I see it, Izuku, we can do whatever we want. Izuku smiled. I like the sound of that. Chapter 3. Symbol of Vengeance. UA High School front gates. Guiding Eri's back with one hand and his walking cane with the other, Izuku and Eri made their way over to the front gates of UA High School later that day. It had taken some smooth talking to get past the cops to retrieve Eri from his apartment, but he had managed it in the end. As they walked, Eri looked between the cane and Izuku with some degree of curiosity. Why do you need a walking stick? Asked Eri, tilting her head in confusion. Because I hurt my leg, Izuku said matter-of-factly. Oh, why didn't you need it when we were running away from the man in the mask? Asked Eri. And you were running super fast too. Smart girl, Venom said inside Izuku's head. It was because of a chemical called adrenaline, said Izuku. And I probably screwed up my leg even more because of it. Also, I would appreciate it if you could keep that little detail to yourself. I don't want anyone trying to make my leg more important than you. If anyone asks, tell them that a big black monster with really sharp teeth and a really long tongue saved us. Eri looked up at Izuku, confused, before she finally mumbled okay. The reason I want you to tell them that is because that's the friend I was telling you about. He's nicer than he looks, so when you actually meet him, don't be scared. Okay, Eri? MHM. Eri hummed and smiled as she nodded, which caused Izuku to ruffle the hair on her head, with a smile on his own face. Good girl, said Izuku as he and Eri reached the front gates of the high school and spoke with the guard stationed at the gate about the situation with Eri. The guard nodded and made a few calls to some faculty members before informing Izuku that a few staff members would meet him at the entrance to the main building. Izuku thanked the man as the gates opened, and he hobbled inside, still guiding Eri by her back as they made their way to the main building of UA High School. As he hobbled along with Eri, memories composed mainly of excruciating pain and agony began to resurface in Izuku's mind, along with memories of her. Izuku wished he knew who she was. He'd never gotten the chance to thank her properly for protecting his broken body from further harm from the robots. Also, from what few fragmented memories he had of the girl, she was actually kind of cute. Oh, have a crush on some girl you barely know, do you, Izuku? Venom said teasingly within Izuku's mind. Shut up, Venom, thought Izuku as he and Eri finally reached the entrance of the main building, where a group of superheroes he vaguely recognized were standing, along with, for some reason, a matchstick of a man with a huge head of blonde hair and a white t-shirt and a pair of blue jeans and sneakers that for some reason looked vaguely familiar to Izuku and made him feel really angry. That guy? I think he might be All Might, Venom said in Izuku's mind. No way, that guy can't be All Might. All Might is super buff, and that guy looks like he'd blow away if you blew hard enough on him, Izuku said to the symbiote. How do you know it's not All Might's quirk that makes him super buff? You were never able to figure out what exactly his quirk was or how it worked, after all, Venom pointed out. Can't argue with that, said Izuku as the group of heroes came out to meet Izuku and Eri, most of them doing what they could to help lift the girl's spirits and escort her into the building, while the matchstick guy invited Izuku to come inside and talk with him. Izuku nodded and followed the man to a classroom marked Y. Toshinori, and took a seat at one of the desks while the matchstick of a man, presumably Toshinori himself, leaned against a desk looking at Izuku intently. So, the guard outside gave me a brief summary of how you and young Eri came to cross paths, but I'd like to hear the story from you, young man. What exactly happened? How did you know that young lady was being menaced by a villain? And is there anything else you can tell me? Toshinori asked. Well, I was on my way home from a trip to a confectionery store to pick up some snacks when Eri bowled me over, knocking me to the ground. I took a look at her to see that she was a complete mess, rags for clothes, malnourished, dirty cuts that were covered up by just as dirty bandages. The poor thing was trembling in fright. That was when this guy in a plague doctor mask came up claiming he was her father, but the way he smiled told a different story. You know, he had that smile that psychopaths have. So, I threw the piece of candy I was eating at him. He freaks out, and I tried to get me and Eri out of there, said Izuku. Sounds like he's run afoul of overhaul, Toshinori said quietly to himself, but not quietly enough as Izuku was able to hear it. Houston, we have a name and a lead, Venom said within Izuku's mind before Toshinori spoke up again. However, I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around you and Miss Eri getting away from this villain, especially with your injury, said Toshinori, glancing at Izuku's cane. We almost didn't, said Izuku. That's when this big black monster of a thing with sharp claws, even sharper fangs, and a tongue long enough that it looked like it had a pink snake sticking out of its mouth showed up. It starts attacking the nut job. A bunch of his guys come out to protect him, and me and Eri slip away in the chaos. I brought her back to my place to keep her safe and get her cleaned up before I decided to bring her here, where I'm hoping you can keep her safe and help her, said Izuku with a dark scowl on his face that left Toshinori troubled. And what exactly made you decide to bring her here? Asked Toshinori. Izuku scoffed. Look, if I had my way, I wouldn't have let her anywhere near you vigilantes and raised Eri myself as my little sister. Too young to have a daughter. After all, the Greenette said bitterly. Unfortunately, there were other circumstances to consider, namely her quirk. I don't know what it is exactly, but it seems like it's very powerful, very dangerous, and she can't control it. If the fact that she thinks she's cursed and that she made her father go away is anything to go by. Whatever my personal feelings are, the fact remains that you guys are the best bet to help Eri get control of her quirk. I can only hope you don't fail her as you failed me. With that, Izuku stood up, grabbed his cane, and limped towards the door as Tashinori spoke again. Wait, Midoriya, I started to say before Izuku stopped in his tracks and slowly turned around and gave Tashinori a glare that immediately made him falter. Oh, so you remember me? Said Izuku, venom in his voice as he continued to glare at the true form of his fallen idol, who still seemed to be struggling for words. I must admit, I'm actually surprised. Do not fail Eri like you failed me. On that note, Izuku opened the door and limped out, leaving a troubled Tashinori behind. As he limped down the hallway, heading for the exit, Izuku was soon stopped in his tracks by the voice of one of the last people he wanted to deal with right now. Well, look who it is. The hell are you doing here, Deku? Didn't know they were doing public tours today. A spike of anger and hatred surged through Izuku as Katsuki Bakugo came from around the corner, giving him a smug look as Izuku threw a scowl at him. Why I'm here is none of your business, Bakugo. I've had enough dealing with people I'm not particularly fond of for one day. So I suggest you get lost and go disgrace the word hero somewhere else, growled Izuku. Bakugo laughed. Or what, you quirkless nerd? Gonna hit me? I'd love to see you try, he said with a sneer. So, gonna tell me what your sorry ass is doing here? Or do I have to teach you a lesson just like old times? Suddenly, Izuku's hand reached out and grabbed hold of Bakugo's shirt, bringing him right up to his face. Listen to me very carefully. A lot has changed in the past week. I've been making some new friends, and those friends would love nothing more than to bite your head off and feed on your brains, or lack thereof. So I'm only going to tell you this once, growled Izuku, beginning to feel the surge of power that could only come from Venom as a confused and startled look crossed his former friend's face, something Izuku couldn't help but relish. Threaten or intimidate me again, and we will end you. And we are not talking about your hero career, Izuku warned Bakugo, his voice becoming slightly more monstrous, and his eyes turning solid black for the briefest of moments, as Bakugo felt a chill run down his spine. Izuku threw the explosive quirk user with one hand, sending Bakugo sprawling to the ground a few feet away. Bakugo looked up at Izuku, who had an ice-cold look on his face as he turned around and limped away, leaving the blonde feeling somewhat unnerved. The punch to his face in the middle school courtyard he could understand, as he was no stranger to venting his anger in such a manner himself. But this was different. Never before had Izuku actually threatened to end someone like he just had to Bakugo. And there was the fact that his voice had turned more monstrous on top of the fact that he had just referred to himself as we. And he could have sworn Deku's eyes turned black as obsidian for a brief moment. Bakugo wasn't sure what exactly had caused it, but something about Izuku had changed drastically over the past week. There was something inside him now, some kind of darkness or monster. Maybe it had always been there, and it had only recently been brought to the surface, but Bakugo knew one thing for certain. Whatever it was sinister, and when it finally came out, it was not going to be pretty. And for some reason, Bakugo couldn't help but wonder if he should be afraid of his former friend or afraid for him. Outside the school. Ah, come on, you should have let me at him, complained Venom from within Izuku's mind as Izuku began to hobble away from the front entrance of the main building. Are you crazy? Attacking Bakugo as Venom in the middle of the single most famous hero academia in the world? We'd have been toast with a capital T. Nuhu. We'll give Bakugo an attitude adjustment another time, when he doesn't have the most famous heroes in the world on hand to help save his sorry ass. That aside, there are a couple things I wanted to go over, said Izuku. Such as? Well, for one thing, I have some concerns about the way you produce webbing. You do that by basically shedding your skin, right? Asked Izuku. More or less, yeah, said Venom. Well, I was thinking about maybe putting together some type of device that would create webs for us, because I'm not gonna lie, The thought of you using too much of yourself to spin a web actually has me worried a bit, said Izuku. Didn't have you pegged for a tinkerer, Izuku. More importantly, don't worry yourself over that. I can regenerate. You don't need a silly little toy like that, said Venom. It's not just that, said Izuku as he continued to hobble towards the gate leading out of U.A, which for some reason never seemed to get any closer from his perspective. You said that sounds in the 4,000 to 6,000 gigahertz range are not only lethal to you, but that they can separate us with prolonged exposure. There's more than one hero out there who can use a sound quirk, and I wouldn't be surprised if there were others out there too. I need to be able to defend myself if that happens until you can latch back onto me. I see. That's a valid point, Izuku, replied Venom. Very well. I do happen to know a formula for creating synthetic webbing that should suit our purposes. One of my previous hosts was native to a planet of man-spiders, so that should suffice, though it feels like there was someone else who used a similar formula. Oh well. Thank you, Izuku said as he continued to hobble. Another thing I was thinking about was that we need a symbol or an emblem of some kind, something that both heroes and villains alike will fear. Any ideas on what you want this symbol to be? Asked Venom. I have a few ideas, Soph, said Izuku as he walked directly into someone and fell on his back as that person fell on top of him. Again? Is crashing into each other some form of greeting on this planet? Venom asked within Izuku's head, sounding slightly amused as he and Izuku came to realize who had bumped into them. It was a girl around Izuku's age with a round face, brown hair in a bob cut, brown eyes, and wearing the female UA high school uniform. It's her, Venom and Izuku thought simultaneously. Oh, hey, it's you, the girl said as she and Izuku disentangled themselves from each other, albeit with some difficulty as Izuku was feigning his leg injury to avoid suspicion. Sorry, I really should have been watching where I was going, the girl said. Nah, that one was on me. Got lost in my head a little bit there, said Izuku as he pulled himself up with his cane. So, how have you been holding up, since you know what happened at the exam? The girl asked Izuku. Been better, still trying to find some kind of purpose to fill the hole my dream of being a hero left in me, but I suppose it could be worse. I could be dead, and Yue could have been in the center ring of a media circus, said Izuku. Well, I don't really know what to tell you about that, said the girl with a nervous chuckle. Well, you can tell me your name, suggested Izuku. It'd be nice to put a name to the face of the girl who probably saved my life after I decided to be an idiot and try to do a hero school entrance exam quirkless. I'm Ochako Uraraka. What about your name? Never got that from you after the exam, the girl said. I'm Izuku Midoriya, said Izuku as he gave Ochako a respectful bow. Ochako smiled at Izuku. Well, I'm sure I'll see you around, Izuku, she said as she walked past Izuku, who watched her walk away. I like her, said Venom from within Izuku's mind. Well, that makes two of us, said Izuku. We should probably get going. We got a lot of work to do in preparation for tonight. Later that night, Venom, his body now bearing two white spider symbols, one on his chest and the other on his back, both connected by two legs that ran along his sides and a pair that ran over his shoulders, with a pair of white patches on the back of his hands, that in truth were the Mark-I web shooters that Izuku had developed to remove the risk of Venom overexerting himself while producing webbing in combat or while traversing the city, perched on the edge of a building overlooking the city. Admittedly, once his web shooters were completed, Izuku began getting ideas for possible upgrades and additional gadgets. However, those would have to wait for another time. I'm really sorry the web shooters are so big. I mean, I know they're not huge, but I didn't really have much time to. Partner, most would take the fact you made them out of scraps and so quickly as a goddamned miracle. You need to stop apologizing for your success, Izuku, Venom thought to his host as he cracked his neck. It was time to go to work. Venom leapt off the building into a dive, shooting a black web to catch himself before he could splat on the pavement, and starting to swing through the streets. Oh yeah, ho-ho, yelled Venom as he swung through the streets, on the hunt for people in need of rescuing, or perhaps another lead to follow on the masked villain overhaul that he'd heard Tashinori mention while being questioned about Eri back at UA. Thankfully, Venom didn't have to look for too long, as he soon heard the sound of screaming coming from nearby. Adjusting his direction to head towards the sound of the screaming, and soon found the source, a group of muggers harassing what seemed to be a small family. Venom grinned. Showtime. With a roar, Venom launched himself towards the muggers, tendrils flaring out in an intimidating manner as he landed, grabbed one of the thugs of a tendril, and slammed him into a wall hard enough to leave a crater, before generating a ball of biomass in his hand before throwing it at two of the other goons, where it exploded like a grenade. The last thug, however, decided to turn tail and run for his life, only for Venom to shoot a blob of himself at the thug, grabbing a hold of them, and then slamming them into a wall, gluing the thug to the wall. His job done, and the heroes no doubt on the way, Venom leapt into the air and started swinging away, leaving the would-be mugging victims confused. Were they just saved by someone with a villain's quirk? Well, whatever that quirk was, the fact remained that the monster had saved them, so they would be cautiously optimistic that a new hero was on the rise, though still, not often you find heroes quite as unnerving as that one. A few hours later, Venom grinned as he swung through the air. Saving that family, along with stopping a couple robbery and a few bands, felt good, but there was still more work to be done in the city, and he needed to stay one step ahead of the heroes in order to avoid any complications, especially if Present Mike decided to turn up and make some noise. As he swung overhead, Venom looked down to see a group of heavily armed men gathering in a back alley, and it didn't exactly look like they were trading baseball cards. Perching unseen on the side of a wall, Venom scoped out the scene, letting out a growl as he recognized one of the thugs doing the deal as one of the thugs who had escaped from his apartment complex earlier that day, something that struck Venom as odd. Why hadn't Electress and the Gremlin taken him into custody? A quiet growl left Venom's throat as he theorized the reason why. Electress and the Green Gremlin were in Overhaul's pocket, which would explain why Professor Squid hadn't been with them when those two rescued Overhaul. Either Professor Squid isn't in Overhaul's employ, or isn't yet. Two more names to put on our list, Izuku thought from within Venom as he continued to observe the scene from the shadows, waiting for the opportunity to strike. It wouldn't be long before that opportunity presented itself as a briefcase that, from what Venom could see, contained several vials of some kind of liquid, most likely drugs, and another briefcase filled with stacks of used yen were exchanged. Leaping down from his perch with a roar, Venom's landing on the ground caused the gathered thugs to stumble a bit, while the thug that was in Overhaul's employ almost immediately developed a dark spot on the front of his pants before grabbing the briefcase filled with money, turning tail, and starting to run for dear life. "Oh no, you don't. You and us need to have a little chat about your boss," snarled Venom before shooting a web that glued the fleeing thug to one of the vehicles parked at the end of the alley, while the other thugs aimed their weapons at Venom or activated their quirks, one of them wielding what looked like a fire quirk, although it didn't seem as powerful as the one used by Endeavor, while another one had a stone quirk, as their body became encased in rock as pointed stones floated around the thug, something that Venom couldn't help but chuckle at. Such powerful quirks, and yet, all you are is some crime boss hired muscle? Pathetic, snarled Venom as he swiftly disposed of the thugs wielding guns with his tendrils, before focusing his attention on the two thugs with quirks. The thug with the fire quirk launched a blast of fire at Venom, who, moving surprisingly quickly for someone of his size, evaded the blast of fire and pounced on the thug, knocking the unprepared thug to the ground before knocking him out in a single super strong punch before getting knocked off the thug by a hail of stones and into a nearby car, causing a large dent to form in the side of the vehicle and causing it to flip over. Pulling himself off the ground, Venom let out a fierce roar before charging at the thug and getting ready to throw a punch, only for the thug to grab Venom's arm and throw him into the wall directly behind him, leaving a crater upon impacting it. Pulling himself up off the ground, Venom instead decided to try a different approach and shot webs at the thug's feet, gluing him in place, while trying to use a pair of tendrils to restrain his arms, only for the thug to grab a hold of the tendrils and pull Venom towards him. Unfortunately for the thug, Venom had counted on the thug doing exactly that, and as he was being pulled towards the thug, Venom landed a punch right on the thug's face, ungluing the man's webbed feet from the ground and sending the man flying through the wall and clear across the other side of the street. Giving a satisfied growl, Venom turned his attention to the thug in overhaul's employ that he'd webbed to a vehicle, a smirk on Venom's face as he realized that the entire front of his pants were soaking wet and that urine was leaking out of his pant leg. Now then, as for you, we've no doubt that the heroes will be here soon, so why don't you and us go find somewhere a bit more private to have our little chat, said Venom, only for his face to fall when the thug passed out. Well, damn, grumbled Venom. A short time later. Hey, wake up already. Come on, we don't have all night. A terrifyingly familiar voice said as the thug regained consciousness to realize that he was hanging upside down over the edge of the very top of a large building. To make matters worse, the only thing keeping him from hitting the pavement was what seemed to be a thin thread attached to the back of the wrist of the creature who had attacked him. Ah, good. You're awake, said Venom, a grin on his face. You know, when we were developing these web shooters, we don't think we ever considered dangling a full-grown man like this. So, for your sake, we hope this webline holds. Of course, your odds will improve if you tell us where Overhaul's base of operations is. I don't know, and I'm serious. He moved after something scared the shit out of him, left a whole bunch of stuff behind. Then where can we find his former base of operations? Growled Venom. I'll take you right to it. Just please don't eat me. Venom tilted his head quizzically. Where the hell did he get that idea from? Remember what we look like and what we said to Overhaul about eyes, lungs, and his pancreas? This guy was one of the people you stuck to a wall. It's possible he heard it wrong, and we can capitalize on that to make them afraid of us sooner. Izuku thought back to his partner. The silence and quizzical tilt made Venom look like he was thinking things over to the formerly armed goon, and in a way he was, just not about what the felon thought. All right. But any sign of tricking us, and Venom made an over-exaggerated bite in the hoodlum's face, making him quickly nod his understanding. Good boy. Industrial District abandoned factory exterior an hour later. The last thug patrolling the exterior of the building grunted as Venom knocked him out cold, his sniper rifle clattering of the side of the factory roof as Venom made his way over to a nearby skylight that seemed almost impossible to see through, although there were places where the symbiote and host could in fact see through it, and it was surprisingly easy to hear the thugs inside chattering. Hey, how many vials of that goat kid's blood we got left? Said one of the hoods. Just 4, and as long as that brat is at Udate, we ain't getting any more of it anytime soon. But we can still make as much trigger as we want. Ain't that right, fellas? Venom became enraged at what had been said, and as the group of wannabe villains cheered and hollered, Venom jumped into the air, stuck 2 webs to the sides of the skylight, and pulled himself down through it, sending shards of glass and metal everywhere as he landed and roared in hatred. Chapter 4. Venom vs. All Might, Round 1. As Venom's roar of hatred filled the manager's office of the abandoned factory, most of the thugs grabbed what seemed to be military-grade weapons, while what seemed to be the leader of the would-be trafficking ring's muscles grew to make the man a hulking brute, but nowhere near the size of Venom. Venom grinned. They aren't nearly well armed enough? Symbiote and host thought in synchronization before the black-clad monstrosity began laying waste to the thugs as they opened fire and were swiftly disposed of. However, the leader of the thugs was proving to be a bit more durable than Venom had anticipated, something that made the black monster's grin grow. He'd been hoping for a challenge on his big debut night. He dearly hoped the brute wouldn't disappoint. As the vigilante and the would-be crime lord traded blows, the bulky man began to get worn down until he eventually was knocked across the room, seemingly defeated. Venom roared in triumph as he leered down at the thug. Did you really think you had the strength and the power to beat us? Venom said as he got ready to apprehend the defeated thug. Not like this. No, the thug admitted as he forced himself up onto one knee, before he glanced at something off to the side, a large chemical flask with half of it filled. But with trigger, he said before grabbing the flask and downing it, nearly drowning in the liquid as he did so. No, not the whole thing, Venom yelled out in horror. Almost instantly, the brute's body began spasming as his muscles began to grow to a size that would make any professional bodybuilder green with envy, and then kept growing in all the wrong ways, transforming the man into an abomination of muscle that towered over Venom and made the black monster take a cautious and terrified step back. This monstrosity's flesh had reddened harshly, with one arm twice as large as it should be, and the other barely any larger than before. While his head hadn't grown at all, the face had grown gaunt, the skin fighting to remain on his face. The hulking beast of a man roared before charging and grabbing Venom by his head and throwing him like a rag doll through the factory wall, sending him crashing through 2 more buildings before finally coming to a stop, becoming partially buried in a pile of bricks and mortar. "Ow," said Venom as he pulled himself up from the ground, taking note that there seemed to be a crowd gathering, no doubt thinking there was a hero fighting a villain, only to be proven wrong as the thing the boss had become barreled through and began pummeling him. Before long, Venom grabbed the larger fist, grew to his full size, still somewhat smaller than his opponent, and punched the red thing back through another building. As Venom looked through the hole in the opposite wall that he had just created, he saw that the monstrous brute of a thug was approaching him, still as terrifyingly muscular as ever as the crowd around Venom began to speculate what was going on. What is that thing? Neither of those two looked particularly heroic. Maybe they're two villains having a disagreement of some kind? Well, whatever's going on, the heroes should be here before long. They'll figure things out, I'm sure of it. Venom growled as he glared down at the approaching enemy. Right, so the direct approach is out of the question. Guess that means we'll have to try an indirect one, thought Izuku from within Venom, before the black-colored symbiote charged back at the malformed malefactor and the two began punching each other, neither actually gaining an advantage. Venom quickly grabbed a hold of a nearby dumpster and threw it at the massive thug, landing a solid hit on the man's comparatively tiny head and actually managing to cause him to stagger back a couple feet. A wound opened on his forehead. Bingo. His body may be nigh invulnerable on that huge dose of that trigger stuff, but it doesn't look like that's the case for Command Central, or what's left of it. Anyway, Venom and his host thought in unison before their early warning danger sense kicked in, prompting Venom to evade the dumpster he'd just launched at the thug as the aforementioned goon made it return to sender. Meanwhile, on a nearby rooftop, All Might watched the battle between the hulking brute of a man and the black creature he had encountered earlier that day, having heard some interesting rumors about its activities that night, mainly consisting of vigilante work as it stopped muggers, robberies, breaking and entering crimes, and was now fighting what appeared to be a supervillain. From what he saw, the black creature certainly had the potential to be a real hero. Unfortunately, the methods the black creature used in stopping crimes bordered on being far too extreme. Although some of the criminals were subdued by a black web-like substance, many more were suffering from severe injuries, including multiple broken bones and heavy internal damage. On top of that, not only had All Might himself not seen anything quite like the black creature before, there was nothing like it in the official registry, meaning that whoever or whatever that black creature was, it was likely using its quirk without a license, which was very illegal. So, despite all the good it had done tonight, All Might had no choice but to bring the black creature in to answer for his unlicensed vigilante work. Unbidden, the words of young Midoriya echoed in All Might's mind as a pang of guilt ran through him. Do not fail Eri like you failed me. All Might wished he could have done more to help the boy. When he'd stopped by his mother's house a couple days ago to check on him, he learned that the boy had moved out not long after what had happened at the entrance exam, and that one day she'd gotten a call from his middle school about him slugging Katsuki Bakugo, someone that All Might had a feeling he'd need to keep an eye on with how hot-headed and prone to anger he was, only for Bakugo to retaliate with his explosive quirk. From what he'd gathered from poking around Midoriya's old room, he came to realize that Midoriya was something of a tinkerer and had one of the most remarkable intellects for someone without a quirk he'd ever seen, to the point where, if his mother was to be believed, he'd actually been offered the opportunity to advance or even graduate from middle school early, yet he continued to turn down the offers. Which made All Might even more worried after their encounter at UA earlier that day, as well as him supposedly threatening Katsuki Bakugo shortly thereafter. Someone that's smart with broken dreams and that much anger and hatred boiling inside them. It did not bode well with him at all. After all, while Midoriya had heard people he looked up to tell him time and time again that he couldn't be a hero, Not once had anyone told him he couldn't be a villain. And when it came to villains, the smarter they were, the deadlier that made them. All Might shook his head. He'd figure out how to keep Midoriya from becoming a villain later. Right now, however, he had a job to do, and it looked like the black creature had just landed the final blow on his opponent. It was time to go to work. Back with Venom. Venom, breathing heavily from exhaustion after his long battle, let out a triumphant roar as the massive hulk of a thug finally went down, unable to keep himself from placing a foot on his fallen foe and striking a heroic pose as a number of photographers took pictures. Unfortunately, Venom's proud moment of victory came screeching to a halt when a familiar voice called out to him. "You've been busy today, creature. I must admit, you do seem like you have good intentions. However, the trail of broken bodies left in the wake of your vigilante actions tonight, and the use of that powerful quirk of yours without a license, whatever your intentions may be, unfortunately means that I must ask you to accompany me to the station." Venom's grin turned almost instantly to a frown as he turned to face the source of the voice, none other than All Might himself, standing there all noble and heroic-like. Venom groaned and shook his head. He'd dealt with enough problems for one day. Right now, he just wanted to get out of here, head home, and take a shower. But, alas, it seemed as though that would not be in the cards. At least, not yet. "We do not answer to false gods like you, All Might," snarled Venom as he glared at the hero. "Oh, and what exactly makes me a false god?" asked All Might. Venom laughed. "Ooh, tough question. All Might, where to start?" "Oh, we know. How about anyone can be a hero?" Did you or did you not say that? And if you did, do you actually believe that? Or was it just some public relations bullshit that you spouted to keep the people who looked up to you buying your merchandise? The black monster snarled angrily. All Might was taken aback. He certainly wasn't expecting that answer out of the black monster. "Well, of course I meant it when he said," only for Venom to cut him off with a roar. "Tell that to the quirkless, who are treated as second-class servants or slaves at best. Tell that to the people born with quirks that everyone says are perfect for villainy. If this cruel, unjust, and bigoted society is the one you defend, then we'll take it kicking and screaming back to the realm of decency and common sense." Venom snarled in rage. "You are the symbol of peace, whereas we are the ones who will shatter that forgery of true peace, the ones who fight for the oppressed and trodden upon. We are the symbol of vengeance. We are Venom." With that, Venom shot a tendril at All Might, which wrapped around him and slammed him into a nearby wall before releasing a powerful roar and charging at All Might, who was just starting to get up off the ground and swiping at him with his claws. All Might dodged out of the way of Venom's strikes before landing a few of his own on Venom, who seemed barely fazed by the super strong attacks, if his leering grin was anything to go by. "What was that? Felt like a fly bit us," said Venom with a snarl before grabbing All Might and throwing him into a nearby building, sending the hero crashing through it and into an empty car. "Ah, what's the matter, old-timer? Losing your edge? Happens to the best of us. Not that you're the best anymore," taunted the black-clad symbiote. All Might groaned as he pulled himself out of the car. Venom was proving himself to be a tough customer. A customer tougher than any he'd faced in a long time. But, even then, he wouldn't give up. Not when the people were counting on him as the symbol of peace to stop this monster and bring him to justice. All Might got up off the ground, yellow electricity dancing around him as he got a running start, his right fist ready to throw one of his signature smash attacks at Venom. "Texas! Smash!" roared All Might as he punched his fist towards Venom, who was sent flying from the air pressure, only to backflip and land firmly on his feet, not very far away at all. All Might couldn't believe it. That Texas smash should have ended the fight right then and there. It had against the last villain similar to Venom, except the black-clad vigilante was still standing. What was he? A Texas smash? How predictable, snarled Venom as he dusted himself off. "Here's a little tip for you, old man. You were the hero we looked up to the most before we took off the rose-tinted glasses and realized the truth about this world. We've studied all your battles. We know your every move before you do. We know how you think." All Might breathed heavily with exhaustion as his muscles began to deflate. "Damn it, my limit is almost up. Still, At least what Venom just said gives me some clues to work with when it comes to figuring out his true identity. The hero thought before he made the decision to make a strategic retreat before his limit came up, leaping from building to building into the distance. Whatever else happened, he couldn't let the people see the true form of the symbol of peace. That's right, old man. Run away. Run away from all the broken promises and lies you've told to the people who believed in you. We'll meet again, All Might. We promise you that, snarled Venom as he watched All Might run away like a coward, before he turned on his heel and faded away before disappearing completely. Not too far away a short while later, Venom became visible once again and reverted back to Izuku, who sat down against a nearby wall and closed his eyes to rest for a moment, feeling completely and utterly drained from the ordeals he had been through that night. True, he had expected to come across a few people with quirks. He certainly hadn't counted on facing anyone like that big brute of a guy who used all that trigger stuff, and definitely not a fight with All Might himself, let alone forcing his fallen idol into a retreat, something that struck him as odd. The All Might he knew would have never run away from a fight like that. Then again, maybe he didn't really know All Might at all, and had only ever seen his public face. Although he couldn't help but wonder if it had something to do with that matchstick-looking form he'd been in earlier. Izuku opened his eyes and looked to the horizon, noting that the first vestiges of the sunrise were starting to appear. He needed to get back home, pass out for a couple hours until his alarm went off, go to school, then head back home and pass out for the rest of the day. Everything aside, he couldn't deny that his big debut was a complete success. The world knew about Venom now and what he stood for, although he had a nagging feeling that forcing All Might to retreat like that was going to have some serious repercussions down the road, and likely make him a target of the hero community in their petty squabble to out-vigilante each other. Izuku scoffed. Who the hell came up with that pro-hero chart anyway? All it's done is turn helping people and protecting the innocent into a petty squabble for fame and fortune. What happened to the days where people were heroes simply because people were in danger and needed a savior? What happened to the days when wealth and fame was ignored and action itself was the reward? Thought Izuku. Your guess is as good as mine, Izuku, Venom said solemnly. As Izuku finally pulled himself up off the ground, unfolded his walking cane, and began to limp back towards his apartment, he caught sight of himself in a window's reflection that was illuminated by a streetlight. Taking a closer look at himself, Izuku frowned in thought. Maybe I should get a haircut, Izuku thought to himself before continuing his trek towards his apartment. Interlude 1. UA Campus Lunchtime. Ochako Uraraka was sitting on one of the benches on the school grounds, quietly eating her lunch as her newfound friends, Shudo Todoroki, Kyu Ajui, Tinya Ida, Mino Ashido, and Momo Yorozu sat around her, all of them chattering about the big news that had broken last night. All Might having been forced to retreat from a new, and honestly terrifying, vigilante known as Venom, who claimed to be a symbol of vengeance, standing for the quirkless and the villainous quirked. From what she'd heard from her classmates, the majority opinion felt like Venom was nothing more than a vicious, mindless monster who was deluding himself into thinking he was a hero, although there were a few folks who felt like he had a point, and that there had been rumors that Venom had actually done some vigilante work prior to his encounter with All Might, and that the sweet little girl, Eri, that had been seen helping out the teachers and staff by being their errand girl, had actually been saved by Venom before being brought to UA to get help with her quirk, which was likewise rumored to be very powerful and very dangerous. Well, I think we're asking the wrong questions, Mina's voice said, pulling Ochako out of her thoughts. The real question we should be asking is who is it that is actually standing for the quirkless and villainous quirked, as the creature says, Venom or the host inside the suit? Host? What are you talking about? Asked Tenya. Well, isn't it obvious? Said Mina matter-of-factly. Venom is actually two beings combined into one. Just from eyeballing it, and judging from his speech patterns, I'd say that someone has become bonded with some kind of symbiote, an alien creature that needs to bond with a host to survive for extended periods in our world. In exchange, the symbiote provides the host with superhuman abilities that can put them on par with even the likes of All Might, as you can clearly see. However, there can be a few side effects, such as becoming a complete jerkwad and borderline supervillain, or being eaten from the inside out. And on top of that, they're super hard to unbind from their hosts. Usually only certain sonic vibrations, like say a bell from a cathedral's bell tower or a sound quirk, or a fire quirk will do the trick. In some cases, they can also be unbound with electrical quirks. Oh, said Shudo, clearly not buying a word that Mina was saying. And how do you know all this exactly? I have my sources, said Mina vaguely. Right. I think you need to lay off the sci-fi movies and manga. Mina, said Momo, an amused smile on her face. Hey, don't shoot the messenger, Momo. I'm just saying. That's what all the facts point to, said Mina. Ochako frowned in thought. If Mina was right, by some stretch of the imagination, could that possibly mean that this theoretical host was merely an innocent victim who was just along for the ride, like a puppet or suit? Did they truly stand for the quirkless who were trodden upon or treated as second-class slaves, and those who were cursed with quirks that were perfectly suited for villainy? Or was that the theoretical symbiote? In all honesty, Ochako had never once thought about if villains had ever wanted to be villains in the first place, or if they turned to villainy because they felt they had no other choice because of their quirks. Or was there something more nefarious that Venom was after? Ochako didn't want to jump to any conclusions, not without seeing the creature firsthand. But if Mina was right, and Venom was in fact a parasite of some kind who was using his host as a sort of hostage, then they, as heroes, needed to save whoever was trapped inside Venom before they lost themselves in some way. That is, assuming they wanted to be saved by this point. Meanwhile, elsewhere on the UA campus, Katsuki Bakuga hated it when he was right, even if he had no way of actually proving his theory. Not that he was usually the theorizing type, that was more of a Deku thing, or at least it had been. Ever since he had that run-in with Deku when, as it turned out, he was dropping off a poor little girl that even he couldn't help but feel sorry for, judging from what he'd seen of Eri's condition at first and hearing about what she'd been through. If he'd had his way, Katsuki would have blown that psychopath to the hell he belonged in. But thankfully, he was put at ease by the fact that Deku had cleaned her up and brought her to UA to get her help controlling her apparently dangerous quirk and to keep her safe from the villain that had kidnapped her. Even without a quirk and a bad leg, you just can't stop yourself from playing the hero. Can you, Deku? Bakugo had thought at the time, a smirk on his face, until Venom had made his big debut, taking down that hulking abomination and again forcing All Might to turn tail and retreat. After their last encounter, Katsuki had suspected that there was something inside Deku now, some kind of monster or darkness, and despite his rescue of that little unicorn girl, the appearance of Venom, a creature the exact shade of black that he'd seen Deku's eyes change to, referring to himself as we as Deku had, it was all too obvious to Katsuki that his former childhood friend was inside that monster somewhere, swallowed, consumed by it. Had Deku really been so desperate for power that he'd made some kind of deal with the devil and willingly turned himself into that creature? Even worse than that, Katsuki had a terrible feeling that he had a role to play in creating that monster. If the creature's rant to All Might was anything to go by, even if he couldn't actually prove his suspicion that it was Deku inside Venom. Regardless of whatever guilt he was feeling about the possibility of his old friend being inside Venom, Katsuki had every reason to believe that the heroes would find Venom and stop him, even if All Might had been forced to flee from him. There was such a thing as a strategic retreat after all. He was sure of it. And yet, that didn't stop him from feeling an inkling of guilt over the possibility of his childhood friend having become a terrifying and deadly monster because of him. Meanwhile, in the UA staff room, Toshinori Yagi sat on one of the couches, his head between his hands. How on earth could he have missed this? How could he have missed any of this? He was supposed to be a symbol for the quirkless and quirked alike, and yet he had missed this. His cell phone had been ringing off the hook with calls from the Hero Public Safety Commission, which ultimately led the aging hero to turn the damn thing off as he looked over what he had dug up during his research. Nearly all of the suicides from the past year alone had been by quirkless young adults and even teenagers who, upon further examination, had been living absolutely miserable lives, bullied by their peers, discriminated against by their employers, among countless other terrible acts. Other suicides had been committed by people who had quirks that were too weak to be used in a practical sense for hero work, or quirks that would have made them into terrifying or deadly villains. Yet these people had no desire to turn to villainy, and according to their suicide notes, they had felt the world would be better off without them. Tashinori couldn't help but shudder at the feeling of shame that was washing over him. These people had looked up to him as a hero and as the symbol of peace, but the more Tashinori looked into it, the more he began to realize that Venom was right. The peace he had given the world was nothing more than a sham, a forgery of true peace, a peace that was only skin deep, masking the discrimination and bigotry underneath. That needed to change. He would do everything in his power to truly prove himself worthy of the title, even in the eyes of these people whom he had failed, people like Izuku Midoriya and Venom. But first, he needed to find Venom and talk to the black-clad being in order to help him see reason before he went too far. The only problem was, he had no clue how to go about doing that, at least not without waiting for the vigilante to show up again. Tashinori heaved a reluctant sigh. He supposed that was what he would have to do then. In the meantime, however, he would continue to seek potential successors for One for All. Although, after her efforts in saving young Midoriya during the near-catastrophic entrance exam, Ochako Uraraka was his top candidate for a successor. Elsewhere, the bar with no name. A small and strange menagerie of people sat at the bar watching a replay of the fights involving Venom, against the trigger-enhanced Crook and against All Might. Now do you understand why I keep that muck alive, and why I want you to bond with it, my protege? Sensei said towards a young adult with dull blue hair, dry and cracked skin, and eyes as dead as a fish's. The young man simply sighed and scratched at the back of his neck. I don't understand why you're so adamant about me using mods when the final boss has already been nerfed. Because with one of these creatures, even a quirkless individual could become a problem to our goals, just as one did in my younger years. I would very much prefer to have one on our side to level the playing field against this newcomer. You're really worried about that hacker, Sensei? Whoever is underneath the mask of Venom was able to use All Might's own technique to gain distance from him, most likely for a quick escape. That suggests a highly analytical mind is at work beneath the bulk. If you, as you are now, were to get into combat with him, the more likely scenario would be your loss. I got it. He's running a high intelligence, high strength build, so I need to match his level or it'll be a TPK. The protege said as he grabbed the container for the green symbiote and reduced it to rusty metal and broken glass. Apparently realizing it was free, the green symbiote seemed to look around, as though it was noting its surroundings, before fixing its gaze on the young man who had released it. Then, the green symbiote lunged for the young man and began to meld with him. Izuku's apartment later that evening. Izuku, a mug of hot chocolate in his hand, smiled as his new, bigger, and recently repaired TV that he salvaged from cleaning up Takiba Beach turned on to the starting jingle of the evening news. Well, let's see what the latest public opinion of our exploits last night were, shall we, Venom? Izuku asked his new best friend as he climbed onto his bed. Sounds good to me, Venom said as his head emerged attached to a tendril from Izuku's back, a grin on his face. As Izuku took a long drink from his mug of hot chocolate, the news took a turn that neither he nor Venom were expecting. Per the order of the Hero Public Safety Commission, the vigilante and so-called symbol of vengeance, known as Venom, is wanted for the murder of the large red creature they were seen engaging in combat last night, identity currently unknown. Any citizens with information leading to the immediate arrest of the vigilante should call, the newscaster said. Izuku choked on the sip of hot chocolate he was drinking before another of Venom's tendrils emerged and whacked him on the back, clearing his windpipe. What? Chapter 5. Tragedies of the Past. Izuku, who was now sporting a much less fluffy hairstyle that, as Venom put it, made him look much less like a walking piece of broccoli, in that it was now a bit shorter and combed back, held in place with a bit of hair gel, making him look marginally more handsome, as the barber who had done his haircut told him, combined with his school uniform, consisting of a black suit with a black undershirt, a red tie, black dress shoes, and his fold-up walking cane, made the young teenager seem far more dapper than he would under normal circumstances, was making his way through the streets of the city, trying to formulate a plan on how to clear Venom's name. In all honesty, I think that trigger-enhanced Thug's actual cause of death was likely from an overdose on trigger, Izuku told the symbiote inside him. The trick is going to be getting the evidence that proves that to be the case, especially since the HPSC is pushing the narrative that we killed him in cold blood. This HPSC, they're your government, right? Venom asked from inside Izuku's mind. If that's the case, then why are they so adamant on pushing the narrative that we killed that guy and labeling us as murderers? The society the HPSC has built thrives on absolutes, the belief that black and white are clearly distinct, without even an iota of gray between them, said Izuku. Enter us, a vigilante who is trying to protect the innocent and be a hero despite having what appears to be a villainous quirk, who proudly resides in that gray area the HPSC so vehemently denies exists, who operates completely outside the incredibly flawed system they've built, and they'll likely do anything and everything they can to paint us as monsters, killers, criminals, anything else they can think of to turn both society and the pro-heroes against us. I see, Venom said inside Izuku's mind. So, in that case, we'll need a way to keep them off our backs, if only for a short time. Exactly, and that's why I'm thinking that dealing with a scandal caused by it being revealed that they manipulated a coroner to establish a false cause of death and frame us for murder should work out quite nicely for those purposes, said Izuku. If all goes as planned tonight, we should be able to get the information to the proper sources in time for the morning news tomorrow. Or we could suit up and go now, make it in time for the evening news, Venom said inside Izuku's mind. No, that's not the best idea, said Izuku. Most of the pro-heroes operate in broad daylight, where they can show off in front of God and everybody. Considering we're not only vigilantes, but are currently wanted for murder, it's too risky to suit up in broad daylight. On the other hand, fewer heroes operate the night shift, so we should be able to operate as the symbol of vengeance with relative ease. As he continued walking, Izuku caught sight of a familiar-looking head of brown hair just ahead of him. Hey, it's Ochako, thought Izuku. Well, aren't you going to go talk to her? Venom asked in Izuku's mind. Izuku could see the symbiote's grin in his mind's eye as he limped to catch up with Ochako. Hey, Ochako, it's me, Izuku. He called after her, prompting the brown-haired girl to turn around and face Izuku with a bright smile. Oh, hi, Izuku, Ochako said with a bright smile before she took note of what Izuku was wearing. What's with the fancy get-up? Oh, this? School uniform for Yasujin High, explained Izuku as he adjusted his tie. Granted, it's no UA, but it's decent enough. And I figured if I was going to look this fancy on a daily basis with a cane and everything, I figured I might as well get a new haircut to match. But, enough about me. How are you holding up? How's UA? Surprisingly, there's a lot more academia in the phrase hero academia than I would have believed, admitted Ochako, rubbing at the back of her neck. We're supposed to be heading down to the unplanned simulation joint in a few days to get a taste of a different type of hero work. And honestly, it cannot come soon enough. The news about that monstrous vigilante Venom showing up and forcing All Might to retreat has quite a few members of my class worked up. Oh, is that so? Asked Izuku, a small smile on his face as he felt no shortage of satisfaction in the fact that, despite not being a student there, he was still the talk of the UA campus. Say, you want to go grab some coffee? I'd love to hear more about how things are going with you at UA High School. Maybe get to know you a little better. Ochako froze, a small blush forming on her face as she thought about what Izuku just said. Admittedly, she wanted to learn more about Izuku as well, especially considering the fact that he actually tried to do the UA entrance exam without a quirk. Plus, there was something about him that she found intriguing, not to mention the fact that he was actually kind of attractive. What was she thinking? After a few moments, Ochako smiled. Sure, lead the way, she said. A short while later in outdoor cafe. Izuku, with an extra-large Togo cup of hot chocolate in his hand, and Ochako, a cappuccino in her Togo cup, were sitting at one of the cafe tables, making small talk. The majority of the conversation was about quirks, and Izuku went into one of his typical muttering storms, which Ochako found cute. Truth be told, if she didn't know any better, she would have thought his quirk was some sort of analysis quirk, or a quirk that granted him an intelligence and intellect to rival even the UA principal. So, Ochako said as she took a sip of her coffee. We've talked about quirks, so who's your favorite pro hero? I mean, you obviously have one, given the lengths you went through to try to make it into UA. A dark look crossed Izuku's face. I don't have one. Not since what happened at the exam, he said, a bitterness in his voice. And to be honest, my fondness for most heroes has been on shaky foundations for a long time. But after that day, I can't really stand pro heroes anymore, particularly All Might, who just care about lining their pockets rather than actually being a hero, stopping villains, and saving lives. If they were heroes, the feeling they get from simply being a hero and saving lives alone would be reward enough, rather than kickbacks from having a bunch of cheap plastic toys mass-produced in their image. Of all the answers Izuku could have given, that certainly wasn't one that Ochako was expecting. I don't really understand. The pro heroes. Are people doing a job? Tell me, Ochako, what does a person do when they're not on the clock? Asked Izuku. Ochako's expression became confused. They go home, have dinner, go about their own business, go to sleep and get up the next morning to do it all over again, she said with uncertainty. And do people like that ever do their work off the clock when there's no reason to? You have a very bleak outlook, Izuku. I have this outlook for a very good reason, Ochako. Do you mind if I tell you the story of one of my first friends growing up? No, go ahead. Thank you. My friend's name was Inoichi. For the longest time it seemed like he was quirkless, like I am. But then when he finally decided to stand up to our bullies, his quirk came in. Congratulations, he must have been very happy. Did they stop bullying you too? No, they didn't stop, and no, he wasn't happy, because his quirk almost killed one of them. Ichi's quirk gave him control over metal, and we were standing next to the school's lockers when it happened. All the lockers rose off the ground or bent at odd angles. Several of their doors flew across the room, and one of them was an inch from taking off our main bully's head. Ochako gasped and held her hands in front of her mouth. After that, he became the school pariah. Izuku continued as his tears started to fall. The insults increased in frequency. They switched out quirkless pig for villain scum, metal monster. They even gave him a villain name, the electromagnetic murderer, Magnus. Eventually, it became too much for him to bear, and he took his own life by putting a 1-yen coin through his brain. The note he left was addressed directly to the bullies, and all it said was, I guess I am a murderer after all, and he signed it as Magnus. Izuku's tears were falling at a more steady pace than they normally would as he wiped them away with his hand. Ochako just stared at Izuku in disbelief, unable to find her voice for a short while. But Inoichi's parents had to have done something about them after that. They tried, but Aldera always made the undesirables out to be just that. Innocents became guilty, victims became villains, monsters got applause for their heroic potential. Izuku's voice began rising. Inoichi's entire family used their collective life savings to hire a renowned pro hero with a detective quirk, only to be told not an hour later by that same person to not waste his time because Aldera paid him more. Izuku almost screamed as his grip started to make indents in the table's quirk-treated material. Calm down, Izuku. You're starting to attract attention. Venom warned his partner as several people were beginning to take longer glances at the two, actually 3 of them. Izuku took a deep breath to steady himself and looked Ochako straight in the eyes. Ochako, how long ago do you think that happened? Well, I think a few years ago, she guessed, but Izuku's tired shake of his head told her she was wrong. Aldera is a junior high, Ochako. My oldest friend got his quirk 2 years ago and killed himself last year. And guess what? One of his killers is attending UA with you, because God forbid if Katsuki gets anything less. Ochako's eyes shot open. Katsuki? As in Katsuki Bakugu? With the explosion quirk? He's in my class. He always came off as arrogant and kind of a jerk, but I never thought he'd make someone commit suicide, she said, horrified. Oh, trust me, he will. The son of a bitch actually told me if I wanted a quirk so badly, to jump off Aldera's roof and pray for one in my next life, said Izuku, his voice both dead, yet seething with rage. And all that stuff about extras and him being the world's protagonist? He actually believes that bullshit. Izuku said as he unfolded his cane and got up from the table. Whatever you do not wound his pride or do anything to get on his bad side like me and Inoichi did by just existing. You piss him off enough, and that psychopath will try to get rid of you by any means necessary. Ochako simply sat there, her mind reeling with shock at everything she just heard as she watched Izuku walk away, stop, come back for his cup of cocoa, and walk away again. She didn't know what she expected when she agreed to have coffee with Izuku, but this certainly wasn't it. She honestly didn't know what to make of any of what Izuku had told her, but it certainly gave her a lot to think about. Ochako did know one thing, though. Izuku Midoriya had a truly tortured soul and was in desperate need of a real friend and a shoulder to cry on. That being the case, then why couldn't she be that friend Izuku needed and have it be her shoulder that he could cry on? Actually make that two things, because Principal Nedzu needed to know the truth about Katsuki and Aldera. Meanwhile, with Izuku and Venom. Izuku was still fuming as he limped away from the cafe. Aldera, even just the thought of that hellhole of a school caused a surge of anger and hatred to run through him because of what happened to him and Ichi there. Part of him wanted to tear that school down with his bare hands, bury the principal and staff in the rubble, and get justice for their role in the death of his best friend. But, thanks to being able to bribe any pro-hero who concerned parents sent to investigate into looking the other way, the school continued to keep up its impeccable appearance of an environment free from discrimination and bullying, when that couldn't be any further from the truth. It was nothing more than a breeding ground for suffering and injustice. Izuku knew that Inoichi could not have been the only victim of the pain and suffering wrought upon those who were quirkless or were cursed with a villainous quirk and attended, and there was likely to be proof that the school had been paying off heroes who went to look into the matter, as well as the genuine records of student incidents. All it would take was that information getting out there for the world to see, and it would all come crumbling down for Aldera and the frauds in their pocket. Those who took their own lives because of Bakugu and the monsters that came before him would finally be able to get justice and be able to rest in peace. A devious grin crossed Izuku's face. Well, if he was an antihero, that meant that he could cause a little bit of chaos and raise some hell from time to time. And after having to relive the memory of the death of his best friend, he was itching to raise some hell. It was only a shame they'd have to wait until he got Venom's name cleared of this little misunderstanding with the trigger-enhanced thug before they finally got what was coming to them. "Izuku, are you okay?" Venom asked Izuku, sounding genuinely worried about his host. "Huh, yeah, I'm fine," said Izuku as he took a drink of his hot cocoa. "It's just, talking about Ichi hurts, you know. He was like a brother to me. Granted, it wasn't quite on the same level as the symbiosis you and I share, but still." "I see. It was you who found the body and the note, was it not?" asked Venom. "No secrets between us, huh?" Izuku said. "And the worst part is, even after all of that, I still couldn't see Bakugu for what he really was. I still admired that bastard, even as he beat me down on a regular basis. I was a fool until the day my dream died. Then I began to wake up and see the world as it truly was," said Izuku. "I see. You know, we could go attack Aldera tonight, and you can take your revenge," said Venom. "It's too much of a risk, especially considering what I just told Ochako. We can't risk her making a connection and figuring out who we are," said Izuku, shaking his head. "More importantly, we need to get our names cleared before we go off on any rampages. Otherwise, that'll just be proving the HPSC right about us. Business before pleasure, after all, as unfortunate as it may be." "I see. Good call," said Venom from within Izuku. "Though if I may ask, do you know which morgue exactly they'd be keeping that trigger-enhanced thug's body, and the evidence that would be keeping the HPSC bogged down with trying to unravel our little scandal while we go about our business?" "Unfortunately, no," admitted Izuku. "There are at least 3 morgues all across Mustafa City that are designated for doing autopsies, and what have you for people with quirks that would normally allow one to do hero work or for doing the same to slain villains. In order to find the one where that thug's carcass is being held, and the evidence we need to clear our names and tie up the HPSC, we'll need access to the city's medical networks. Though, to be honest, I have to wonder something." "Oh, and what would that be?" asked Venom. "Why is it that the HPSC is pushing the narrative that we killed that thug so hard? It almost feels like they have it out for us more than any other vigilante said to be out there, like it's personal or something." Chapter 6. Duel with Desert. Swinging through air high above the city streets, Venom made his way towards the largest hospital in all of Mustafa City, making sure to keep his guard up as he traveled in case a hero who worked the proverbial night shift decided to pick a fight. Venom knew that there was a decent chance that he would be able to access the city's medical networks at that particular hospital, and through it, he would be able to locate the body of the trigger-enhanced thug, as well as the evidence he would need to clear his name and tie the Hero Public Safety Commission up for however short of time he was able to buy. Soon, the black-clad vigilante arrived at his destination, perching himself on the perimeter wall as he surveyed the hospital entrances. Okay, with our shape-shifting abilities, we should be able to sneak into the hospital fairly easily. Now, the devil in the details. How do we access the medical networks? Simply intimidate the medical director, perhaps? Venom muttered to himself. Yes, perhaps that would be the best course of action. Venom was pulled out of his thoughts as his early warning danger sense kicked in. Damn, he really needed to think of something cooler to call that power. Maybe spider sense? His symbiote did say the ability had come from a race of man-spiders, much like the formula for his black web fluid had, among other highly useful abilities. Sadly, the man-spider's power to generate electricity was not among the abilities that Venom had picked up from his host from that planet, but Izuku could make do. Back to the matter at hand, however, Venom soon realized that a sizable group of people had gathered at the side of the building. Using his camouflage abilities, Venom turned invisible and saw that these people were apparently trying to break into the side entrance of the building, and among them appeared to be 2 or 3 villains from the looks of things, and judging from the containers they had, they didn't look like they were going to do anything especially horrible like destroy the hospital. No, they looked like they were going to steal something. Odd. Venom thought to himself as he leaned closer at the group. Why would villains want to break into a hospital looking to actually steal something? Still, the distraction caused by the chaos of the villains and their minions' little heist could prove useful for allowing us to take a look at the medical networks undisturbed. Once we have what we need from them, we can take out the villains and their flunkies and make our escape with the data we need. A grin forming on his unseen face, Venom quietly joined the group of thugs just as they popped the lock on the door and began to storm inside the hospital, making a beeline for cold storage. Weird, thought Venom as he followed the thieves into the cold storage. Upon arriving, Venom soon realized that the thieves were, for some unknown reason, stealing human brains that were clearly intended for brain transplant procedures. Venom, you didn't hire these guys while I was sleeping last night, did you? Because I don't exactly have a lot of money to be blowing on brain heists. Or heists at all. Plus, we're antiheroes, not villains. Izuku thought from within Venom. What? No, of course not, the symbiote said within Izuku's mind. Although, there might be something else that we need to worry about sooner or later. Oh, and what would that be? Asked Izuku. Never mind, I can't be certain if it is what I think it is, Venom replied to his host and partner. In any case, we should head up to the medical director's office and get the data we're after, and then deal with these punks. Okay, if you say so, replied Izuku. And with that, Venom made his way out of cold storage, sneaking past the security guards who were more than likely about to have a bad night thanks to the villains, and made his way to the director's office, the door of which was left ajar. Upon entering the room, Venom's concealed grin grew even wider at the sight of the director's computer, which had apparently been abandoned, with the director still logged into it. Thank you, Lady Luck. Venom and Izuku thought simultaneously as he became visible, made his way over to the computer and took a seat, and soon found that not only were the medical networks pulled up, but so was a web page for lonelyloser.com, the crappy online dating website. Ugh, some people. Whatever happened to just growing a backbone and asking someone out? Worked out nicely for us when we asked Ochako out for coffee. Ugh, focus, Venom, focus, Venom growled to himself as he began his search for the trigger-enhanced thug. It took a while, but eventually, the black-clad being found what he was looking for, a John Doe with a muscle-enhancing quirk that had been enhanced far more than it was supposed to through illicit means, and was apparently murdered by a vigilante. Apparently, the autopsy was done at a morgue on the far side of the city that just so happened to be under the oversight of the Hero Public Safety Commission. Unfortunately, that was all the information that Venom could find. Okay, got what we came for. Now we just have to take care of those villains that are stealing brains. Venom and Izuku thought to themselves as he closed out of the medical networks, turned invisible, and began to sneak his way back down to the cold storage, only to find that the villains had already been defeated, that there were large piles of sand all over the place, and that he was currently standing in one such pile of sand. Oh no, thought Venom mere moments before what felt like a sack of bricks slammed into his face, sending him flying through a nearby wall and out into the street, causing several cars to swerve out of the way and end up in a bit of a pile-up as he became visible again and flipped through the air to land, sliding onto his feet as the source of the attack revealed itself. It was a young man a couple years older than Izuku with short brown hair, wearing a green striped sweatshirt, khakis, and brown loafers, whose right arm was currently reverting from a giant, stone-hard fist made of sand back into a regular hand. "And who's this guy?" Venom asked his host. "I think he might be the Sandman hero, Desert, son of the Sand Hero Snatch, and his quirkless wife, hence the epitaph. That also means his quirk works a bit differently than his father's. On top of that, he's fresh out of U.A, so he doesn't actually have a ranking yet on the pro hero charts," explained Izuku from within Venom. Desert, meanwhile, spoke loudly as he approached Venom, a triumphant look on his face. "The HPSC was right about you. I knew you were nothing more than a villain who was just deluding himself into thinking he was a hero, and now, here's the proof. Breaking into a hospital with a group of known villains and wanted criminals to steal human brains for some ungodly reason." Well, that answers that question. Clearly this guy bought the bullshit the HPSC has been lying down, Izuku said bitterly from within Venom as the black-clad monster stood up and roared at the hero. "Shows what you know, sand for brains," Venom said aloud. "For starters, we're on a strict chocolate diet, and for another thing, we were here to stop the villains and criminals, not help them." The black-clad being lied easily. Desert didn't need to know the real reason he was at the hospital. Even if that were the case, the fact still stands that the HPSC wants you brought in for the murder of that red abomination you fought the other night, said Desert. "So, the question is, are you going to come quietly or covered in sand?" Venom roared again. "We will not confess to crimes we did not commit. We have a strict no-killing rule. Beating villains near death, yes, depending on the severity of their crimes, but never outright murder. Even if, admittedly, some of these villains actually deserve it, like that overhaul guy," the vigilante snarled. "Who are you to talk about rules when you don't even play by them, vigilante?" retorted Desert. "In any case, it seems like you've chosen Facepunch, so let's dance." And on that note, Desert launched himself in a whirl of sand at Venom as his fist grew in size and landed square on the vigilante's chest, sending him flying through another wall. "Ow," growled Venom as he pulled himself up to see Desert walking through the hole in the walk, one hand in a giant stone fist, the other in the shape of a giant mallet. Acting quickly, Venom threw a solid punch at Desert, which landed firmly on his head, scattering the sand it was composed of before quickly reforming. "Missed," Desert said nonchalantly before Venom tried once again to strike him in the head, only for the sand it was composed of to once again be scattered, only to quickly reform. "Missed again." With a furious roar, Venom attempted to punch Desert in the stomach, only for his fist to sail right through the Sandman hero's stomach and promptly become stuck thanks to the rest of the sand that composed his torso. "Ooh-ho," said Venom before he was sent flying through the far wall and out into the street on the other side of the building before slamming into a parked car and coming to a stop. "Ugh," groaned Venom as he pulled himself out of the car. "Okay, so brute force is out of the question, which means we'll have to get crafty, and we'll need to do it quickly before Sandy over there gets himself some reinforcements." Okay, let me think," Izuku said from within Venom. "Got it. His body is made up entirely of sand, right? So, all we'll need to do is sprinkle a little water on him, and he'll solidify, and he'll be out for the count. But we'll need to be careful about how much water we use, otherwise we could risk dissolving and killing him, or turning him into some kind of mud monster. A fire hydrant should do the trick." Quickly spotting a nearby fire hydrant, Venom leapt over to it and waited for Desert to follow him out of the building. Once the Sandman hero appeared, Venom quickly ripped the fire hydrant from the ground and used his arms to direct the gushing stream of water at Desert, almost instantly turning the sand that composed his body into a grainy mud. Once he had been sufficiently doused with water, Venom leapt into the air, shot a web line, and broke Desert apart in one swinging kick, effectively rendering the hero out of action. However, movements that Desert's shattered body was making in trying to pull himself back together were a clear indication that he was still alive. Venom gave a triumphant roar of victory before leaping into the air again, firing a web line, and swinging away from the scene, just as other heroes arrived on the scene. So, how do you know that'd work on Desert without killing him? Venom asked his host. Well, you see, I heard about an accident he had during the UA Sports Festival a few years back. When he won, his teammates dumped the water cooler on him, and his body started turning to mud and began falling apart. It was a complete mess. But once the mud dried, Desert was able to piece himself back together. He even regrew the parts of him that fell off. So, I figured as long as we didn't use too much water, we'd be able to put him out of action without killing him, explained Izuku. I see, replied Venom. So, do you want to head over to that morgue on the other side of the city, get the evidence to clear our names? No, not tonight. I have school tomorrow. Plus, I want to try and figure out why those villains and criminals at the hospital were trying to steal human brains, but I get the feeling you know more about this than you let on, Izuku said. And like I said, I'm sure it's nothing. I mean, I do have a suspicion, but I highly doubt there's any merit to it. Although, if there is any merit to it, we might have bigger problems to deal with than petty crimes and misguided heroes, said Venom. Chapter 7. Positives and Negatives. As he made his way down one of Mustafu's streets after school the following day, Izuku pondered over the hospital robbery he and Venom had stumbled across the night prior before they got entangled with Desert. Izuku was relieved to learn that Desert was expected to make a full recovery after having been blasted by the stream of water, although he was far less relieved to learn that the HPSC had announced that because of the attempt on Desert's life, Venom had not only been labeled a full-fledged villain, but the HPSC had announced that when captured, he would be locked away and left to rot in Tartarus prison. That aside, Izuku was somewhat surprised to learn that All Might of All People had released a statement criticizing the overly heavy-handed approach the HPSC was taking in regards to handling the situation. Not only that, while he didn't condone the sheer brutality and viciousness of Venom's methods or his apparent preference of punishing the guilty rather than protecting the innocent, he did sympathize with Venom's professed goal of becoming a symbol that those that society had seemingly all but abandoned and trodden upon could look up to and rally behind. However, despite this surprise, it did little to restore Izuku's faith in his fallen idol. He had been burned too many times by people he once looked up to be won over that easily. Either way, with the HPSC labeling Venom as a villain, it was more important than ever for Izuku and his symbiote ally to acquire the evidence that proved the HPSC had lied about the trigger-enhanced thug's death. That, and get the target they had painted on his back at least somewhat removed. I still don't get it, though. Why were those goons stealing brains of all things? Izuku asked the symbiote. They need the DNA? They're attempting to make cyborgs? Suggested Venom from within Izuku's mind. Izuku sighed and shook his head. No, that can't be it. Only Island would be capable of pulling off something like that. That, and they wouldn't hire a bunch of villains and thugs to steal them. It would be easier to just flat out buy a stockpile of brains. Besides, last I heard, David Shield and his daughter were working on an instantaneous transportation device of some kind. I think it had something to do with the multiverse or something. I don't know. He let out a long sigh. I guess we can figure the whole brain heist thing out later. Right now we need to scope out that morgue and figure out how to get in there and get the evidence to clear our names. We could do that. Or we could work on expanding your social circle, replied Venom, making Izuku look across the street to see none other than Ochako Uraraka walking down the opposite sidewalk. She was chatting away with what looked like a trio of other girls that Izuku could only assume were her friends. Oh, come on, Venom. We shouldn't bother Ochako. She's hanging out with her friends from UA, replied Izuku. Izuku, if you're going to win the heart of the fair Ochako Uraraka, you're going to need to meet and leave a good impression on her friends. Don't bother lying and saying you don't have those kinds of feelings for her. You know there are no secrets between us. I know you have a crush on her. A small, yet constantly growing and evolving crush. But a crush nonetheless, Venom told his host, causing Izuku to sigh again, his face slightly red before shaking his head. All right, you made your point, Izuku grumbled before making his way across the street. Hey, Ochako. Ochako and her friends turned to see Izuku hobbling his way toward them. Oh, hey Izuku, she happily replied while waving at him. So, this is the guy you were telling us about, Karo? A girl with long dark sea green hair and what seemed to be a frog mutation quirk instantly asked. Yes, I see, said another one of Ochako's friends. This one having pink skin, pink hair, and was wearing a pink outfit, who was also looking at him with a discerning eye. Yes, he certainly does seem like good boyfriend material. She yelped as the third friend, a girl who had black hair tied in a ponytail, elbowed her in the side, cutting her off. Hush, Mina. He doesn't need to be getting the wrong idea, the third friend whispered before adding, even if it is totally accurate, under her breath. Izuku, who had heard none of what had just been said, smiled brightly as he reached Ochako and her friends. I was on my way back to my apartment when I saw you and your friends walking by, so I thought I'd come and say hello. Well, this is Tiu Azui, Ochako replied while pointing at the girl with the frog mutation quirk, who smiled at Izuku. Mina Ashido, Ochako continued as she turned to the pink-haired and skinned girl, who was rubbing her side where the third girl had elbowed her as she smiled at Izuku. And Momo Yaezuru, Ochako finished. Ochako has told us quite a bit about you, Izuku. I can see why you would want to become a hero badly enough that you would attempt to take the UA entrance exam despite being quirkless, Momo commented as she smiled at Izuku. Yeah, she's totally head over heels for her. Mina started, only to get another elbow to the side, this time from Ochako. Hush, Mina. Not now, hissed Ochako, who had a small blush on her face before she glanced back at Izuku, who was raising his eyebrow in response. Sorry about Mina. She's really into romance, even though I keep telling her that you and I are just friends. Hey, I'm flattered, Izuku responded while sheepishly rubbing the back of his neck. Say, you girls want to go hang out someplace and chat a bit? I'd love to get to know you all a bit better. I know this great cafe near here, best French fries in the city, if you ask me. Mina, Momo, and Tsu all turned to Ochako at that, and unless he was very much mistaken, devious grins on their faces appeared as they all subtly nodded their heads, silently telling her to say yes. Ochako's face was now as red as a tomato as she replied, I'm sure. We'd love to hang out with you, Izuku. Great, Izuku responded as he spun around. If you'll follow me then. Mixed Diner 45 minutes later. Momo, Hu, Mina, and Ochako had to admit, these were some pretty good fries, an opinion that was shared by Venom. Izuku, for his part, was surprised to see the old man he'd run into while he was cleaning the beach prior to the entrance exam working here as a short-order cook. More than that, Izuku was rather delighted as to how things at UA were going. And in all honesty, he really needed some good news after how the last few days had gone. According to the girls, Eri had been taken into the care of one Shoyuta Aizawa, better known as the underground hero Eraserhead, who was rumored to be dating a hero by the name of Ms. Joke. Eri was also apparently making great progress on getting a better grasp on her quirk, which was a kind of chronological rewind quirk that worked on living creatures, working to master it by using it on small insects and birds. However, when she used her quirk, the horn on her head shrunk down, only to grow again as more of her power built up. Principal Nedzu and the rest of the UA staff think that when and if Eri gets full mastery of her quirk, she could be the greatest recovery hero of her generation. Degenerative diseases could become ancient history. Cancer, crippling paralysis, all nothing but bad memories. If nothing else, her quirk could buy those suffering from such afflictions more time until they can figure out what's causing the disease and cure it permanently. Recovery Girl was practically over the moon when she realized the restorative potential of Eri's quirk, Momo told Izuku. That's nothing compared to how doting both Sir Naitai and his intern Mirio are, Mina added. I think if Mr. Aizawa hadn't volunteered to take care of Eri, Sir Naitai definitely would have taken her in himself. And Mirio's practically become Eri's big brother. Sir Naitai is a teacher at UA? Izuku asked, I thought he and All Might had some kind of falling out. No, Ochako shook her head, but apparently the guy who imprisoned and experimented on Eri was a key figure in a big investigation Sir Naitai and Mirio are conducting, so he came to talk to her to see if she could tell him anything that might help his investigation. And after that, he took a liking to her. But really, who wouldn't take a liking to Eri? She's so adorable. Perhaps we should pay a visit to UA at some point. Check and see how little Eri is doing among the heroes for ourselves, Venom commented within Izuku's mind. Agreed. Seems like Nedzu and the staff are putting the cart before the horse by assuming that Eri wants to become a recovery hero, or even a hero at all, thought Izuku with a mild bitterness. Then again, Nedzu isn't exactly a human, so maybe we should cut him some slack. Oh, Izuku, I should probably tell you this before I forget. Ochako chimed in with a serious expression on her face. I told my friends and Principal Nedzu about what you told me about your friend Bakugu and Aldra. An unreadable look crossed Izuku's face as he focused back on her. And what did your friends have to say about what I told you? He quietly asked before turning to Tsu, Mina, and Momo. Well, for one thing, you seem like every bit as great of a guy as she said who doesn't deserve all the crap that life and that explosive asshole has put you through. For starters, that is, Karo, you started. And that the rest of our friends are really interested in meeting you sometime, added Mina. One of our friends used to be Bakugu's best friend, and when he found out what he did to your friend and to you, he ended his friendship with Bakugu on the spot. In fact, I think no one wants to be Bakugu's friend, not after what Ochako told us, Momo finished. A grateful smile spread across Izuku's face. Thanks for that. Truly, he nodded, but what about Nedzu? What did he have to say about Aldera and Bakugu's true colors? Unfortunately, there's not much to be done on that front, Ochako sighed. While Nedzu did say that he believed me, and by extension you, unfortunately, there's not much he can do without hard proof. Sounds like another item for our to-do list, once we expose the HPSC's lies about us, Venom growled. Indeed, Izuku thought before he spoke aloud. You know, call me crazy, but I have a hunch that evidence Nedzu needs to bring that hellhole of a school crumbling down will show up before long. He then pulled out his phone before saying, well, I have to meet up with my mom, so it was nice meeting you all, but I gotta go. And with that, Izuku left his payment on the table before standing up and departing the restaurant, all four girls watching him go. Yeah, Ochako, you were right. He really does seem like he needs a real friend really badly, Karo, Tiu commented with a slight frown on her face. I just hope we and the rest of our little squad can provide the support he needs and help restore his faith in the good of this world. Though I suspect it won't be easy, not with everything he's been through because of his quirklessness and Bakuga's. I'm not even sure it can be called bullying. I think it's more along the lines of torture. And he went through that for 10 years straight. And I thought Shudo was a mess from what his dad put him through, Momo added. Well, if anyone can fix Shudo, it's you, Momo. Just like Ochako is the one with the best chance to fix Izuku, Mina giggled. Ochako, for her part, chose to say nothing, as she was troubled by what Izuku had said before he left. I have a hunch that evidence Nedzu needs to bring that hellhole of a school crumbling down will show up before long. Izuku, you're gonna do something dangerous, aren't you? Ochako mentally said. Above Mustafu streets later that night. As Venom swung above the Mustafu streets, Izuku was formulating a plan for exposing Aldera and Bakugu for who and what they truly were. He likely couldn't do it as either Venom or Izuku, as the latter would likely get him arrested for breaking and entering, while the former would probably cause other problems for him to deal with, so what to do? I'll figure that out later, Izuku mentally decided. Right now, I gotta figure out how to get inside that morgue and get the evidence we need to. Izuku was pulled out of his thoughts when his symbiote sense, as he had decided to call it, went off mere moments before a blast of black, blue, and whitish energy struck Venom in the side. Yo! He yelped as the air was knocked out of him, sending him crashing into the streets below. Venom let out a groan at this, only to suddenly have his wrists bound by some kind of support device. Venom then pulled his head up, only to see a man who looked like a living photo negative with short hair clad in a business suit that was no doubt modified with additional protections despite it appearing completely normal. In his left hand was a baton that seemed to resemble a highly ornamental sword. But if Izuku knew his heroes right, which he was proud to say he did, it wasn't actually a sword. Oh great. It's the photonegative hero, number 18 on the Japanese pro-hero charts, Mr. Inverter. In addition to those energy blasts, his quirk allows him to invert people, Izuku mentally grumbled. What do you mean, invert people? Venom asked his host. I mean that he has the ability to flip around people's perception of right and wrong through prolonged physical contact. So good becomes bad, and bad becomes good, Izuku replied. Seriously? A quirk like that, and he's only the number 18 hero? How is he not number 1? Asked Venom. His power doesn't last forever, but it does last long enough for the villains and criminals he captures to be arrested. That, and he isn't really into the top hero's little contest to out-vigilante each other. And as the hero reached Venom, Mr. Inverter crouched down to look the vigilante in the eyes and chuckled. I gotta admit, that was easier than I was expecting it to be. Especially considering you're supposed to be the villain who made All Might turn tail and retreat, the photonegative man commented, his voice distorted by his quirk. Venom roared at this. We are not a villain. The HPSC is lying. We did not kill that thug or anyone else. And Desert attacked us first while we were investigating that hospital break-in. We only acted in self-defense. Oh, sure. Mr. Inverter chuckled as he placed his hand on Venom's chest. Now then, do me a favor and try to relax. Mr. Inverter's power then began coursing from his hand into Venom and into Izuku as a result, causing Venom's black body to suddenly turn white, while his white eyes and the white spider symbol on his chest along with the white patches on the back of his hands to turn black. After a few moments, Mr. Inverter removed his hand. That should do the trick. Now, what say we head down to the station and get you into a nice warm cell before you get shipped off to Tartarus? Yeah, sure. Just one question, Venom chuckled. Was that actually supposed to do anything? Or was it just supposed to give us a new color scheme? Because while we'll agree that white is probably more heroic, black is more our color. Mr. Inverter raised an eyebrow at this. Only for one of Venom's trapped arms broke free from the device before grabbing the hero by the front of his shirt and threw him across the street. The following crash caused the hero to drop his sword-like baton as Venom's other arm broke free of its restraint. He then pulled himself up off the concrete as the photonegative hero got up as well. What is this? You should be consumed by guilt over your crimes. Why didn't my quirk work? Yelled Mr. Inverter. Unless we're mistaken, your quirk inverts people, so bad becomes good, and good becomes bad. White turns to black, black turns to white. But, tell us something. What if the person you use it on is neither good nor evil, neither white nor black, but rather resides in the gray somewhere in between? What happens then? Asked Venom as he lumbered toward Mr. Inverter. But that's impossible. No one can exist in the gray between hero and villain. It simply doesn't exist. Mr. Inverter yelped before firing a blast of energy at Venom, the blow knocking the vigilante back and into a wall, leaving a large crater. That's what the distorted society built by the HPSC wants you and the rest of this world to believe. Venom growled as he quickly began to pull himself out of the wall. That black and white, good and evil, are clearly distinct, without even a speck of gray in between. But then again, what do you expect of the organization who says that only those with specific quirks can be heroes, while those with villainous quirks are automatically labeled as supervillains, and those without any power at all can do nothing but worship the ground the egomaniacs who think themselves gods among men walk on, even if they're completely horrible human beings? Take Endeavor, for example. He endangers more people in his fights against villains alone, as opposed to the people he saves, to say nothing of what we've heard of his parenting and family man skills, and yet he still has people who idolize him as the number 2 hero. This society has been distorted and twisted from what it should be, where quirks and powers are everything, and who the people with those powers are as human beings means nothing. And it is our new purpose in life to take it back, kicking and screaming back to the realm of decency and common sense, so no one else has to suffer for daring to reach for the impossible, as we did. No one else. Venom roared as he shot his arm out at Mr. Inverter, instantly grabbing him and gluing him to a wall. And that is who we are. With that, Venom began to walk away, only for Mr. Inverter to yell, "You aren't going to kill me? You had no problem trying to kill Desert." Venom stopped and turned to face Mr. Inverter. "We told you before, we're not murderers. Our mother did not raise a supervillain. Our father might have for all we know, but he left us a long time ago. Mom thinks she can hide it from us, but we're not idiots. Besides, you were just doing your job as a hero, trying to take down a wanted villain," Venom said while using air quotes before his body changed back to its regular color scheme in a puff of blue, black, and whitish energy. "Ah, that's more like it. We were worried we'd have to change our name to Anti-Venom or something. Anyways, where were we? Oh yeah, as we were saying, we don't fight real heroes like you and Desert. We only fight villains, criminals, and corrupt heroes who care more about themselves and their wallets rather than the safety and protection of the innocent. That, and people who just really piss us off. You do not fit any of those criteria, so you just get to stick to that wall and think about what we told you." Venom finished before leaping and swinging away into the night, leaving Mr. Inverter alone with his thoughts. However, unbeknownst to Izuku and Venom, Mr. Inverter's power actually did have an effect on them, just not one that anyone could have predicted. The energy from Mr. Inverter that was sent into Izuku caused an odd reaction, resulting in bits of Venom merging with Izuku's white blood cells, and even into his bone marrow. It was thanks to Venom healing Izuku's injured leg, though it would take many more months of trials and tribulations before the results of this biochemical reaction became apparent. And when it did, it would breathe new life into Izuku's old dream of becoming a true hero who saved people with a smile. But that is a tale for another time.